Chapter 1829. Young Lady Evil Spirit Within the Central Divine Hall. Yuan Hongwen's entire body trembled when he saw this scene through the senses of his soul. In particular, when he saw that the heavenly worm had actually devoured the Taoye's flesh, the fear in his heart grew even more intense. Heavenly insect. These two lunatics have actually released the heavenly insect. Oh no, they wouldn't have released the heavenly god Imperial Spear as well, would they? Yuan Hongwen trembled all over as he muttered in a low voice. At this moment, Yuan Hongwen truly felt a sense of powerlessness. Facing the heavenly insect and the masked man, he suddenly realized that he was really too weak. He was like an ant that could be crushed to death by these existences at any time. Countless black shadows shrank back into the heavenly insect's body. Then, the heavenly insect licked his lips. His eyes were bloodthirsty as he looked at the central divine palace on the skeleton. He chuckled and said, "There seems to be a little guy in the palace, right?" The masked man glanced indifferently at the central divine palace and said indifferently, "This is the central divine palace, and also the palace that has suppressed you for 10,000 years. It won't be easy to break through this palace. We don't need to waste time on this." "Hee, then we'll listen to you, sir. However, we can't let this little guy get away so easily. Let him taste the terror of the black water." The heavenly insect cackled. Then, a black shadow surged out from his body. It swept up the central divine palace and tossed it into the black water lake. Splash! Inside the central divine palace, Yuan Hongwen smiled bitterly as he clenched his fists. He didn't like the feeling of being controlled, but there was nothing he could do. The entrance of the palace was covered by the masked man's black vortexes. If he stepped out of the palace, he would immediately be attacked by the black vortexes. At that time his life would be in danger. Even if he went out, so what? He would still be devoured by the heavenly insect in the end. He didn't have the confidence to face the heavenly insect, who was already a terrifying existence 10,000 years ago. Moreover, there was the masked man behind the heavenly insect, who was even more terrifying. Bang! 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 The moment the central divine palace fell into the Blackwater Lake, it immediately alarmed the many black shadows in the lake. They all gathered and began to attack the central divine palace with no regard for their lives. That's good too. This way, we can draw away some unnecessary trouble. The man with the devil face mask glanced at the central palace that had sunk into the black lake. Then he stomped his right foot and jumped into the black lake. Yen Tianwei and the shrunken sky worm followed closely behind, closely following the man with the ghost face mask. After passing through the deep and distant tunnel, Zhuowen and the first mountain god arrived at the end of the tunnel. Zhuowen discovered that at the end of the tunnel, there was actually an extremely large garden. This place was filled with clusters of flowers, and its myriad of colors always gave one a dazzling feeling. In front of the garden, there were several pavilions with carved railings and jades arranged in a picturesque, disorderly manner. In the middle of these pavilions, there was a huge palace with dragons and phoenixes carved on it. Strange beasts of all shapes and sizes were arranged in rows, causing the surface of the palace to reveal a trace of majesty. At the same time, outside the palace, there were 9 huge golden statues. These 9 golden statues were covered in armor, as if they were incomparably divine immortal soldiers. What made Zhuowen fearful was that in the depths of the palace in front of him, there was actually an aura that made his heart palpitate, slowly spreading out. This palace is not ordinary. I'm afraid there is some extremely terrifying existence inside. The first mountain god frowned slightly. Zhuowen nodded, but his expression was even more alert and vigilant. The moment Zhuowen and the first mountain god stepped into the garden, the entire garden suddenly trembled, as if there was some huge living creature at the bottom of the garden that was trembling. Suddenly, in front of Zhuowen, a bright red flower squirmed for a while, and a shadow appeared on the flower. This shadow was a young girl in the prime of her youth. This young girl was only wearing a light veil, and her hands were hugging her knees as she curled up on the ground. She slowly raised her head, revealing an innocent look, and stared at Zhuowen. Then she suddenly asked, "Can I ask you a question?" Zhuowen frowned slightly. It was already very strange that the image of a young girl had suddenly appeared on the flower. Moreover, this young girl had even asked him this so-called question. Zhuo Wen's heart was filled with bewilderment. Can I ask you a question? The young girl spoke again, and the innocent look in her beautiful eyes became even more intense. Zhuo Wen pondered for a while, and said indifferently, ask away. After receiving Zhuo Wen's answer, the young girl was very happy. She asked, who am I? Zhuo Wen narrowed his eyes, and stared at the young girl in front of him. His eyes were filled with coldness, but he did not answer. What's wrong? Why aren't you answering me? The young girl asked anxiously. I don't know. Zhuo Wen answered truthfully. At this moment, the young girl's face suddenly froze. She stared at Zhuo Wen, and the original innocent look in her eyes was replaced by a trace of ferocity. You don't know? Why don't you know? The young girl roared at Zhuo Wen, and the aura on her body suddenly became somewhat violent. Zhuo Wen slowly retreated dozens of steps. His eyes flickered as he stared at the roaring young girl in front of him, and the vigilance in his eyes became more and more intense. It seems that this is not good. The first mountain god looked around, and Zhuo Wen also followed the gaze of the first mountain god. He discovered that the flowers in the entire garden were actually the shadows of young girls, and these young girls' faces were filled with ferocity. You definitely know who I am? But you didn't say it. You're lying to me. Why did you lie to me? The young girl roared fiercely, and then the flower under the young girl's shadow began to squirm. The soil kept shaking, and then a skeleton crawled out. The skeleton's bones were quite slender, and it should have belonged to a woman when she was alive. Moreover, it was very likely that it was the skeleton of the young girl's shadow when she was alive. On top of the skeleton, there were flowers, and the roots of the flowers were implanted into the skull of the skeleton. It was as if the nutrients of the flowers were absorbed from the skeleton. Not only the flower under the young girl's shadow, but all the other flowers in the garden also crawled out from the soil, revealing the ferocious skeleton. Every flower in this garden represents the life of a young girl. The master who built this garden back then was really cruel. He actually used the bodies of women to cultivate the flowers. Zhuo Wen's eyes were cold as he said, What? Are you pitying these pitiful girls who died? The first mountain god said indifferently. Zhuo Wen nodded and said, I am indeed pitying them, but there is nothing I can do now. The only thing I can do is send these young girls' souls into the cycle of reincarnation. As he said that, Zhuo Wen bent his right finger, and suddenly, countless underworld water droplets rushed out from his body, and then formed a huge gate of reincarnation behind him. Then, Zhuo Wen stepped on the gate of reincarnation with his right foot, and commanded the gate of reincarnation to rush toward the young girl's shadows in the garden. As the gate of reincarnation rushed toward them, the young girls' souls screamed and were directly absorbed by the gate of reincarnation, becoming a part of the gate of reincarnation. Without a doubt, the gate of reincarnation was the biggest nemesis of these young girls' evil spirits. Wherever the gate of reincarnation passed, the young girls' evil spirits were not spared at all. Suddenly, an ear-piercing shriek came from the hall in front of the garden. The shriek was so sharp that even Zhuo Wen could not help but cover his ears to resist the corrosion of the shriek. Rumble. The moment the shriek came, the eyes of the 9 huge golden statues standing in front of the hall shone with golden light. Then they turned their heads and stared coldly at Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, the 9 golden statues turned into 9 rays of golden light, and rushed toward Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god. Wherever they passed, the space collapsed and the earth cracked. Leave the 9 golden statues to me. You deal with these souls. The first mountain god said indifferently. He stepped on the ground and rushed toward the 9 rays of golden light. Then he threw out a punch. A terrifying fist wind whizzed out, and the 9 rays of golden light stopped in midair, revealing the 9 huge statues. Clang clang clang. The moment the 9 golden statues were stopped by the first mountain god, they immediately pulled out the golden swords on their backs and slashed toward the first mountain god in unison. The first mountain god sneered. Golden light burst out from his body, and his body grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, he grew to the same height as the 9 golden statues. The 9 golden swords slashed down on the first mountain god's body as expected. Unfortunately, the first mountain god's physical body had reached a terrifying level. When the 9 golden swords slashed on the first mountain god's body, Countless sparks burst out, and they were unable to do much damage to him. Break for me. The first mountain god laughed and punched the nearest golden statue with his right fist. The powerful fist wind stirred up a terrifying storm and swept toward the sky. Crack! When the fist landed on the golden statue buzzed. Countless cracks appeared on its body, and in the end, it collapsed inch by inch. The moment the golden statue was destroyed, the remaining 8 statues attacked the first mountain god for the second time. Unfortunately, the first mountain god did not care about these attacks at all. He continued to throw out punches. The remaining golden statues could not fight back at all, and they were smashed into dust by the first mountain god. On the other hand, Zhuowen's side was also very smooth. Wherever the gate of reincarnation passed, the young evil spirits were sucked into the gate of reincarnation and entered the cycle of reincarnation. Moreover, Zhuowen also noticed that the gate of reincarnation's power was increasing as it absorbed these young evil spirits. It was as if some kind of law was being born in the gate of reincarnation. When Zhuowen arrived in front of the young evil spirit that first appeared, the young evil spirit's expression was extremely calm. She looked at the gate of reincarnation indifferently, and then said indifferently, "Before you absorb me, can you answer my question?" "No," Zhuowen said indifferently. Then, the gate of reincarnation rotated and directly sucked the young evil spirit into the gate of reincarnation. Chapter 1830. Book Immortal Kongwen, you've got a lot of guts. You actually dared to destroy the flowers and guards that I planted. A cold voice came from the depths of the hall. Then, the originally faintly discernible terrifying aura suddenly became much more terrifying and solid. It was as if a terrifying existence was slowly walking out from the depths of the hall. Zhuowen looked over and saw a slender figure slowly walking out from the hall. It was a middle-aged man in a gray robe. At this moment, the man had his hands behind his back and was staring at Zhuowen and the first mountain god with a gloomy expression. Zhuowen observed carefully and found that there was a strange mark between the middle-aged man's eyebrows. The mark was in the shape of a strange beast opening its mouth to devour something. It was also emitting a strange blue light. The moment Zhuowen's gaze fell on the strange mark between the middle-aged man's eyebrows, he couldn't help but think of the terrifying giant claw that he encountered in the black pool. The aura of the mark was similar to the giant claw. Why is the aura of the mark between the man's eyebrows so similar to the giant claw? Could it be that the two of them are related? Zhuowen frowned slightly. He vaguely grasped the key point in his heart. However, after thinking about it carefully, he still couldn't figure it out. The moment the middle-aged man walked out of the hall, he glanced at Zhuowen. Then his gaze fell on the first mountain god. However, he slowly narrowed his eyes. He could feel an aura from the first mountain god that he was extremely wary of. Book Immortal Kongwen? The first mountain god was a little surprised. "Senior, do you know this person?" Zhuowen asked. This person was very famous in the ancient times. He was a true immortal expert. Although he wasn't as famous as the fighting Buddha demon Saint Shiji, he was still considered a top expert among the true immortals. Xiaohei appeared on Zhuowen's shoulder. She looked at the middle-aged scholar with a complicated gaze and continued. 10,000 years ago, I clearly remember that Book Immortal Kongwen had fallen in the great battle. However, I didn't expect that he didn't die. Instead, he is still in this hall. Kongwen? I think you have mistaken me for someone else. I am number 22 under Master's command. I am not called Kongwen, the middle-aged scholar said with a cold gaze. Xiaohei and the first mountain god looked at each other. This Kongwen seemed to have completely forgotten his identity. Also, what did this so-called number 22 mean? Who is your master? Xiaohei's eyes flashed as she suddenly asked. However, Kongwen laughed loudly and said coldly, "Master is master. If you want to trick me, you'd better give up on that idea." Xiaohei frowned slightly. This Kongwen had completely changed. What kind of existence was this master that he spoke of? Kongwen's current appearance should have something to do with the strange mark between his eyebrows. First mountain god, capture this person alive and search through his memories. When the time comes, you will naturally know who his so-called master is. Xiaohei said in a deep voice. That's exactly what I was thinking. The first mountain god sneered. He took a step forward with his right foot and moved towards Kong Wen at an extremely fast speed. The first mountain god's body was too strong. Every step he took caused the garden to shake violently. How presumptuous! Kong Wen's eyes were cold. He waved his sleeve and instantly, countless flowers floated out. Furthermore, a young female evil spirit appeared on each of the flowers. These evil spirits' faces were filled with malevolence, as if they were in extreme pain. Roar! Accompanied by the petals, these evil spirits let out an extremely ear-piercing howl and rushed towards the first mountain god. The first mountain god's eyes narrowed slightly. He threw out a punch, but he realized that these evil spirits did not have a physical body. His punch simply missed. These evil spirits brazenly attached themselves to the first mountain god's body. This caused the first mountain god to frown slightly. He only felt that his entire body was being attacked by a disgusting chill. This feeling made him very uncomfortable. However, just as the first mountain god was being harassed by these evil spirits, Zhuowen had already arrived. He pointed his right finger and released the gate of reincarnation once again. As soon as the gate of reincarnation appeared, these evil spirits seemed to have met their nemesis. They screamed and fled, but they could not escape the suction force of the gate of reincarnation. Senior first mountain god, leave these evil spirits to me. You can deal with Kong Wen, Zhuowen said in a deep voice. The first mountain god glanced at Zhuowen. Immediately after, his body moved like lightning and continued to rush towards Kong Wen. Kong Wen's eyes were ferocious as he coldly looked at Zhuowen. Immediately after, he opened his right hand and took out a golden book. Heaven's fall and earth's rend is in this book. After he finished speaking, golden runes flew out from the golden book. These runes gathered into a huge golden mountain and crushed towards the first mountain god. Moreover, the moment the golden mountain crushed down, the ground beneath the first mountain god's feet began to crack, forming a deep abyss. The first mountain god's right foot stomped on the void and directly jumped out of the abyss. He rushed towards the golden mountain that was crushing down. Heaven and earth fist. The first mountain god roared and threw out a punch. Heaven and earth trembled. Countless violent winds gathered into violent ripples, causing countless cracks to appear in the surrounding space. Rumble. The punch landed on the golden mountain. Instantly, the golden mountain shattered into countless golden dust. The runes that were lingering on the golden mountain were also instantly scattered by the punch. Kong Wen frowned slightly. He coldly snorted and performed another hand seal. Countless golden runes flew out from the golden book and formed all kinds of sharp weapons. There were sabers, spears, swords, shields, and so on. They all flew towards the first mountain god. The first mountain god's physical body had reached an unparalleled level. These things could not cause any harm to him. After a short while, the first mountain god rushed in front of Kong Wen. He clenched his right hand into a fist and suddenly punched out. Suddenly, the surrounding space crackled. The violent storm turned into a huge wind dragon. It roared and engulfed Kong Wen. Kong Wen's face changed slightly. He held the golden book in his hand and raised it. Suddenly, endless golden light burst out from the golden book and scattered. It was like countless golden rain, forming a dazzling golden storm around him to resist the huge wind dragon. Heaven's rend fist. The first mountain god's eyes were cold and emotionless. He punched out again. This punch seemed to be able to destroy the void. The moment the punch landed on the golden storm's defense, the golden storm was instantly destroyed. The punch was like a hot knife through butter as it blasted towards Kong Wen's chest. Kong Wen's eyes were filled with panic. Then it was replaced by determination. He pointed at the strange mark between his eyebrows with his right hand. Rumble. The moment the mark between Kong Wen's eyebrows lit up, an extremely strange roar sounded. Then, the mark between his eyebrows began to rotate and turned into a strange phantom of a strange beast's head. The phantom of the strange beast's head suddenly swooped towards the first mountain god, as if it wanted to swallow him whole. The first mountain god narrowed his eyes. Instead of retreating, the punch advanced. Its speed and power had increased by a lot. Bang! When the punch landed on the phantom of the strange beast's head, the terrifying fist energy exploded. The first mountain god originally thought that the fist energy would be able to shatter the phantom of the strange beast's head into dust. However, he did not expect the phantom of the strange beast's head to be so tenacious. After squirming for a while, it actually swallowed the first mountain god's fist. The first mountain god's eyes were filled with shock. He could not help but retreat. However, the head was extremely strange. The moment it swallowed the first mountain god's right hand, it wanted to extend towards his body. The first mountain god showed a decisive expression and did not hesitate to cut off his right arm. Blood splattered everywhere. The first mountain god's face was slightly pale as he retreated to Zhuowen's side. The phantom of the strange beast's head continued to chew. Then, with a gulp, it completely swallowed the first mountain god's right arm. It even made a strange chewing sound. Zhuowen was flabbergasted when he saw this scene. The phantom of the exotic beast's head was truly a little too bizarre. The first mountain god's body was unparalleled in the world. It was impervious to fire and water. However, it was still so easily swallowed by the phantom of the strange beast. After the phantom of the strange beast's head swallowed the arm, its blue eyes stared greedily at the first mountain god. At the same time, it let out a sinister laugh like an owl. What is this thing? Cold sweat appeared on Zhuowen's forehead. This thing is very strange. Its body has a devouring power that even I can't resist. As long as this devouring power comes into contact with me, it will be impossible to escape. The first mountain god looked at the phantom of the strange beast's head with great fear. Then he took out a pill and swallowed it. Immediately after, the wound on his right arm stopped bleeding. Moreover, a new arm grew out from the wound. Even so, Zhuowen could still feel that the first mountain god's aura was much weaker than before. Growing a new arm must have consumed a lot of his energy. It seems that it likes your body very much. Didn't you hear it shouting happily? Kongwen suddenly knelt on the ground. His face was pale and bloodless, and his eyes were filled with the desire to die. However, he looked at the phantom of the strange beast's head with a fanatical gaze. It was as if he was willing to sacrifice his life for the phantom of the strange beast's head. Roar! Suddenly, the phantom of the strange beast's head turned around and stared coldly at Kongwen. Then, under the shocked gazes of Zhuowen and the first mountain god, the phantom of the strange beast's head opened its mouth and swallowed Kongwen whole. Munch, munch. The sound of chewing echoed in the space again. That sound sent chills down one's spine. Zhuowen, we have to go. This thing is too strange. It seems that it can swallow anything. This is much more terrifying than Tao Tai. The first mountain god said in a deep voice. Zhuowen nodded. Just as he was about to retreat, the mysterious eyeball hiding in his collar suddenly moved. Then it shot out like a bolt of lightning, heading straight for the illusory head of the exotic beast. Before Zhuowen could even react, the mysterious eyeball had already appeared in front of the phantom of the strange beast's head. Then the mysterious eyeball blinked, and suddenly, a black lightning burst out from its pupil. Chapter 1831. Chessboard under the black lightning. The strange beast's skull was completely devoured by the black lightning without any resistance. Zhuowen was not the only one who was stunned. Even the powerful number 1 mountain god was dumbstruck. The devouring power of the strange beast's illusory head was giving him a headache. If he wanted to completely destroy the strange beast's skull, he could do so. However, he would have to pay a huge price and he could not afford to take such a risk. However, the mysterious eyeball that had suddenly appeared had completely devoured the strange and troublesome strange beast's skull, with just a single black lightning bolt. The usually calm first mountain god could not help but be shocked. Buzz, buzz, buzz. After devouring the strange beast's skull, the mysterious eyeball kept blinking. It seemed to be extremely happy and satisfied. It was as if the strange beast's skull was an extremely delicious meal for the mysterious eyeball. Zhuowen, what is the origin of this mysterious eyeball? The first mountain god's eyes flickered as he asked. Zhuowen shook his head and smiled bitterly. I obtained this mysterious eyeball from the shattered elephant abyss. I am not sure of its exact origin, but I know that this eyeball has something to do with the god of heaven. Since it has something to do with the god of heaven, why is this eyeball with you? Moreover, the black lightning bolt that shot out from it is extremely extraordinary. The first mountain god said in a deep voice. Zhuowen understood the meaning behind the first mountain god's words. He nodded and said, "I will pay attention to this matter." Zhuowen had already thought of the suspicious points of the mysterious eyeball. However, the eyeball did not show any abnormalities during the time it had been with him. Therefore, Zhuowen did not pay too much attention to it. However, the scene that had just happened reminded Zhuowen that the mysterious eyeball was not simple. There might be some hidden dangers. Therefore, Zhuowen secretly raised his guard against the mysterious eyeball. Swoosh! The mysterious eyeball returned to Zhuowen's side. After jumping around him for a while, it returned to his collar. Zhuowen purposely inspected the mysterious eyeball and discovered that its aura was much stronger than before. Clearly, absorbing the illusion of the exotic beast's skull had benefited it greatly. "Let's enter the palace and take a look. I wonder what is inside the palace," the first mountain god said in a deep voice. Zhuowen nodded slightly when he heard this. Soon after, the two of them stepped into the large hall with cautious expressions. The inside of the hall was extremely dark. Behind the door was a deep tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, there was a blue light emitting. This blue light gave people a cold feeling. The two of them walked through the tunnel, and finally arrived at the end of the tunnel where the blue light was located. This was a large hall. There were dozens of huge stone pillars that were so thick that it would take several people to wrap their arms around them. The surface of these stone pillars was carved with dragons and phoenixes, making for a spectacular sight. Moreover, the surface of these stone pillars was emitting a faint blue light. This blue light spread out in all directions, illuminating the entire hall in a faint blue color. A cold chill swept out from the hall. Even Zhuowen could faintly feel a chill. In the depths of the hall, there was a huge throne. This throne was also emitting a faint blue light. The throne was very high. Below the throne, there was a staircase that was dozens of feet high. On the throne, there was a stalwart figure. Looking at the flickering figure, Zhuowen and the first mountain god were both on alert and slowly approached. When the two of them arrived at the bottom of the staircase, they discovered that the figure sitting on the throne was not a real person, but a stone statue. This stone statue was extremely lifelike. It was the image of a middle-aged man. His eyes were looking straight ahead with a trace of arrogance. "This person is Songjie." Zhuowen stared at the figure sitting on the throne, and his pupils involuntarily shrank. Previously, when he was in the Black Ball, he saw everything that happened 10,000 years ago. Naturally, he was clear about Songjie's appearance. The face of the statue on the throne was exactly Songjie's appearance. "Master!" Xiaohei rushed out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows with an excited expression. He stared at the stone statue on the throne and trembled with excitement. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He did not expect that there would be a stone statue of Songjie in this hall. Could it be that Songjie was really deep underground? And why was the stone statue of Songjie here? Zhuowen carefully looked at the stone statue of Songjie sitting on the throne, and looking straight ahead. His eyes slowly narrowed. Suddenly, he discovered something. Dang! Zhuowen suddenly stepped onto the staircase and walked up to the throne. Boom! The moment he stepped onto the staircase, an invisible and powerful pressure suddenly crushed down. It was as if countless mountains had smashed onto Zhuowen's body at this moment. The dim blue light on the surface of the staircase instantly burst out with brilliant brilliance. Zhuowen frowned and immediately used the indestructible divine body of 10,000 Tao. The dark golden light on the surface of his body covered his whole body. He resisted the extremely terrifying pressure with his strong body. Dang! 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 Zhuowen walked up step by step. His speed was very fast, but it was very steady. He left a footprint with each step. Although the pressure became more and more terrifying as he walked up the steps, Zhuowen did not stop. The moment Zhuowen came to the front of the throne, the pressure there reached an amazing level. Even if Zhuowen used the perfection divine body, he could only bend slightly and look pale. In desperation, Zhuowen took out the Fushi cauldron. With the cauldron's characteristics, he absorbed the extremely powerful pressure around him. The moment the pressure was completely absorbed by the Fushi cauldron, Zhuowen slowly stood up. He looked straight ahead in the posture of the statue, but he was shocked. In front of him was a thick stone pillar. This stone pillar was not much different from the other stone pillars. If there was a difference, it would be that there was a dim blue mark on the top of the stone pillar in front of him. This dim blue mark was exactly the same as the mark on Kong Wen's forehead. They were both in the shape of a strange beast opening its mouth and roaring. This stone pillar is not ordinary. Zhuo Wen silently withdrew his gaze and secretly memorized the stone pillar in his heart. The mark on the top of the stone pillar could not be seen at the same level as the throne. After coming down from the throne, Zhuo Wen came to the side of the first mountain god. The first mountain god asked, "Did you find anything up there?" Zhuo Wen nodded and said in a deep voice, "I found a stone pillar that is different from the others. Follow me. I think this stone pillar is the key to entering the world behind the stone hall." As he spoke, Zhuo Wen took the lead and rushed out. After searching for around an hour in the hall, he finally found the stone pillar with the blue imprint at the top that Zhuo Wen had seen beside the throne. The blue light on the surface of this stone pillar was much brighter than the other stone pillars. Of course, this brightness was only relative. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to see it. This stone pillar? The first mountain god looked at the stone pillar in front of him. Zhuo Wen nodded slightly. Soon after, he extended his right hand and gently placed it on the surface of the stone pillar. Soon after, he discovered that the entire hall began to shake. Soon after, the blue light on the surface of the stone pillar became much brighter. Not only that, but the blue light of the other stone pillars in the hall had also become much brighter. Moreover, the moment the blue light became brighter, strands of blue light burst out from the surrounding stone pillars and surged into the stone pillar that Zhuo Wen was in. Gotcha. Countless strands of blue light converged. The stone pillar faintly showed signs of not being able to hold on. Soon after, countless cracks appeared on its surface. The cracks expanded and spread throughout the entire stone pillar. Soon after, the stone pillar collapsed. The blue light contained within wriggled violently, and actually formed the illusion of the strange beast's head that Kong Wen had released outside the hall. However, the size of this strange beast's head in front of him was clearly much larger than the previous one. Moreover, it gave Zhuo Wen a feeling that this blue head did not give off a strong sense of danger. Instead, it gave off a gentle feeling. This head looked down at Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god. Then it slowly swooped down, opened its mouth, and swallowed Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god. The first mountain god originally wanted to resist, but he was stopped by Zhuo Wen. Zhuo Wen's eyes shone brightly as he said, "The entrance to this hall is in this head's mouth. There is no need to resist." Hearing this, the first mountain god fell silent. In the end, he chose to believe Zhuo Wen and did not resist. When the blue strange beast's head swallowed Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god, the entire hall returned to its original state. The shattered stone pillar also returned to its original state, as if nothing had happened. When Zhuo Wen and the first mountain god completely disappeared from the hall, in the depths of the 59th cave beside Zhuo Wen, there was another hall. There was also a large hall here, but this hall was built on a boundless grassland. Here, green was the main color. Inside the hall, the man with the devil mask, Yin Tianwei, and Sky Worm stood quietly in front of a stone pillar. If I'm not mistaken, this cave and the hall inside are only the entrance test to the depths of the heavenly armor planet. Once we enter the entrance, the true test will begin, Yin Tianwei said calmly. The man with the devil mask nodded. Then he looked at Sky Worm and said, "After entering this place, you should change your appearance. Otherwise, you'll definitely be recognized by the Divine Master, Do Hua." "You're right, sir." Sky Worm clasped his fist. The black gas around him wriggled, and his originally ferocious appearance began to change. In the end, he became a young man in gray. Even the unique aura within Sky Worm's body was completely concealed. Even an expert like the Divine Master, Do Hua, would find it difficult to tell that this young man was actually a young man. "Now let's open the entrance," Yin Tianwei said calmly. His small hand landed on the stone pillar. Immediately, a blue light shone. What happened next was the same as what happened in the hall where Zhuo Wen was. After that, the three of them were swallowed by the strange beast's head. After Yin Tianwei and the other two disappeared from the hall, in the depths of the heavenly armor planet, there was a space. In the center of the space was a black river. Above the river was a rather large wooden bridge. Chapter 1832. The Black Desert. One of them formed a sword with his hands and pinched an oval black chess piece. He gently placed it on the chessboard. The crisp sound of the chess piece hitting the chessboard echoed around the wooden bridge, like an echo in an empty valley. Looks like all the chess pieces are here. I wonder what kind of exciting chess game these chess pieces will bring us next. After the chess piece was placed, the figure shrouded in black fog revealed a pair of scarlet eyes and sneered. Opposite this person, who was also shrouded in black fog, said indifferently, "Don't be careless. These chess pieces are not simple. They might be able to break open this chess world." Haha. So what if I break it open? It'll be even better if I break it open. I haven't tasted a human warrior in a long time. The person licked his lips and revealed a sinister smile. It was an endless desert. Furthermore, the sand that made up the desert was not yellow, but pitch black. Wisps of strange gray gas lingered around the desert. These wisps of gray gas constantly wriggled in the air like gray snakes. When the two figures landed here, they immediately caused the surrounding black sand to sweep up. Furthermore, the gray gas that had been quietly lingering in the air began to stir. Is this the space inside the hall? Zhuowen surveyed his surroundings, revealing a trace of surprise and bewilderment in his eyes. In particular, the gray aura that lingered in the surroundings actually gave him a sense of danger. Be careful of the gray gas. Suddenly, the first mountain god said to Zhuowen. Then, Zhuowen heard the sound of something breaking through the air around them. The gray gas that had been quietly lingering around them suddenly rushed toward Zhuowen, and the first mountain god like flower petals. The terrifying gray gas was like a volcanic eruption. It hung upside down and engulfed Zhuowen, and the first mountain god. Zhuowen's expression was ugly. He flicked his right finger, and immediately used the slaughtering finger of Acheron. A huge gate of reincarnation appeared around him, and suddenly blasted out. Instantly, the gray gas that was lingering around them was dispersed. Zhuowen took advantage of this opportunity and took a step forward, directly escaping the area where the gray gas gathered and lingered. The first mountain god punched out, causing the gray gas to disperse as it followed closely behind Zhuowen. Furthermore, the first mountain god discovered that the gray gas was rather fearful of his physical strength. The moment he punched out, the surrounding gray gas had already dispersed in advance. In fact, he did not actually hit the gray gas. Whoosh! Whoosh! The moment Zhuowen dashed out, the gray gas seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. It directly enveloped the gate of reincarnation, densely packed. Not long after, Zhuowen discovered to his shock that the gate of reincarnation was gradually shrinking. In the end, the gate of reincarnation completely vanished. Moreover, after devouring the gate of reincarnation, the amount of gray gas had increased by a lot. What? The gray gas swallowed the gate of reincarnation? Zhuowen's eyes were filled with shock, and he couldn't help but retreat as he stared at this scene in horror. The first mountain god's eyes flickered as if he had thought of something. He said to Zhuowen in a deep voice, "Try using another immortal technique." Hearing this, although Zhuowen was surprised, he did not say anything. Instead, he formed a seal with his right hand, and celestial core power gushed out as he used the Lone Peak immortal technique. A huge lone peak formed from countless celestial core power, and it smashed down from mid-air, smashing into the gray gas. However, the gray gas was very smart. They all retreated, and then they enveloped the entire lone peak, making it airtight. Under Zhuowen's astonished gaze, the lone peak's size gradually shrank, and finally turned into nothingness. The amount of gray gas increased again, like a cockroach that could not be killed. This gray gas should live by devouring celestial core power. The immortal technique you used contains extremely rich celestial core power. Although its destructive power is strong, it is an excellent delicacy in the eyes of the gray gas, the first mountain god said in a deep voice. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy. This was the first time he had seen a gray gas that could devour celestial core power. How should I break it? Zhuowen knew that since the first mountain god had said this, he should have a solution. Fight it with your physical body. The gray gas is extremely afraid of physical bodies, the first mountain god said. Hearing this, Zhuowen did not hesitate. He immediately used the 10,000 indestructible divine body, and his entire body was covered in dark gold, making him look like a mighty god of war in golden armor. Zhuowen took a step forward and directly shot towards the grayish qi. He threw a punch forward, causing a wild wind to howl. Soon after, he discovered that the grayish qi, which had been extremely difficult to deal with earlier, had actually dodged the instant it made contact with his fist. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed, and he changed the direction of his fist. He swung it to the side, and his fist turned into a claw, and caught the gray gas that was trying to escape in his palm. Then, Zhuowen realized that when the gray gas came into contact with his skin, which was glowing with dark gold light, the gray gas went into his skin. Soon after, he discovered that the moment the gray gas entered his skin, it actually caused his physical body to faintly show signs of strengthening. Although this strengthening trend was not particularly obvious, it was still detected by Zhuowen. Senior First Mountain God. Absorbing the gray gas can increase the strength of your physical body, Zhuowen said happily. The First Mountain God's eyes lit up, and he did the same thing. He grabbed a ball of gray gas and absorbed it. Indeed, he could feel his physical body showing signs of strengthening. However, the First Mountain God's physical body had reached the ultimate perfection realm, and the gray gas had little effect on him. The gray gas is quite beneficial to you. I will help you collect the gray gas, and you can absorb it to cultivate the 10,000 indestructible divine body. As the First Mountain God spoke, he took a step forward with his right foot, and chased after the gray gas around him. Although the gray gas was fast, it was not as good as the First Mountain God, and they were all caught by the First Mountain God. Zhuowen nodded and sat cross-legged on the ground. Then, the First Mountain God kept transferring the gray gas around Zhuowen for Zhuowen to absorb. This place was full of danger. If Zhuowen's cultivation could become stronger, it would be of great help, and he would not be a burden. There was a lot of gray gas around the Black Desert, and the First Mountain God had collected almost all the gray gas in the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. The amount of gray gas could be described as a vast ocean. It took Zhuowen half a month to completely absorb the massive amount of gray gas. His holy body was indeed much stronger than before, but there was still a certain distance between him and the great perfection. I need more of this gray gas. Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly as he said in a deep voice. The First Mountain God came to Zhuowen and said, I have collected all the gray gas in the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. If you want more, you have to go to the source of the gray gas. After half a month of investigation, the source of the gray gas is 100,000 miles ahead. The First Mountain God said calmly. Zhuowen looked at the direction the First Mountain God was pointing at, and he found a wisp of gray gas floating in the sky far away. It was like a lone smoke in the desert. Let's go and take a look. Zhuowen's eyes were burning. After tasting the sweetness of the gray gas, Zhuowen naturally wanted to absorb more of it. If the gray gas was really the source of the gray gas, Zhuowen would not let it go. When the two of them were only a few thousand meters away from the gray gas, they found that under the gray gas was a huge tower. The gray gas was floating out from the top of the tower. At that moment, at the top of the tower, where the gray gas was coming from, a figure stood. This person was wearing black and ferocious armor, and his eyes were emitting a cold, bloody light. When Zhuowen and the First Mountain God approached the tower, the black-armored man narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhuowen and the First Mountain God. Then he grinned and said, You are able to come here. Not bad. This place will be your burial ground. The black-armored man made a gesture with his right hand, and suddenly, many black shadows rushed out from the sand at the bottom of the tower. These black shadows were all wearing black armor, and their faces were covered by masks. It was impossible to see their faces clearly. There were a total of 10 black shadows. When these black shadows rushed out, strange black flames appeared on the surface of their black armor. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 10 black shadows were extremely fast. They were covered in black flames as they rushed toward Zhuowen and the First Mountain God. You are just a bunch of minions. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? The First Mountain God sneered. He took a step forward and stomped on the black sand in front of him. Suddenly, countless black sand rolled and surged into the sky, forming an extremely terrifying and strange black sand wave. The moment the black sand wave surged, the First Mountain God rushed out like a ghost. After 10 colliding sounds, the first mountain god landed on the ground again. As for the 10 black figures that were originally rushing over, they were all sent flying backwards. As they were sent flying backwards, the black flames on the surface of the 10 black figures were extinguished. Their bodies also collapsed into a pile of loose sand as they were sent flying backwards. The instant the 10 black shadows were destroyed, it immediately attracted the attention of the black armored man at the top of the tower. He looked at the first mountain god deeply and said, "Your strength is not bad. However, since you dare to enter this place, you will not escape the fate of death. Death my ass. Today, I will tear down this broken tower of yours." The first mountain god snorted and clenched his right hand. Suddenly, the void beside his right hand collapsed and a black rod appeared in his right hand. Holding the black rod in his hand, the first mountain god swung it and heavily smashed it at the bottom of the black tower. Moreover, the moment the black rod was swung, it expanded continuously and finally turned into a black mountain that was thousands of feet tall. Rumble! The huge mountain smashed at the bottom of the tower, causing the entire tower to tremble violently. The black armored man's pupils shrank and revealed a trace of horror in his eyes. Not enough. Break for me. The muscles on the first mountain god's right hand bulged, and he swung it again. The black mountain instantly expanded from a few thousand feet to a few 100,000 feet tall. Wherever the mountain passed, the space shattered, and countless grains of sand danced in the air, creating a terrifying sandstorm. Every sandstorm was enough to annihilate an earthly immortal realm warrior. If Zhuowen did not rely on the strong body of the indestructible divine body, he might not be able to withstand the terrifying sandstorm. Bang! Chapter 1833. Perfect Saint Body. The black armored man's pupils shrank. The moment the tower shattered, he moved like a shuttle and disappeared from where he stood. Whoosh! At the same time, countless gray gas leaked out from the tower. Like steam, it spread out in all directions. In the middle of the gray gas, a gray bead was faintly discernible. Zhuowen saw the bead hidden in the gray gas. He guessed that the bead was the source of the gray gas. Thinking of this, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and rushed toward the gray bead like a ghost. He believed that as long as he absorbed all the gray gas in the gray bead, his saint body would reach the perfect saint body. The black armored man saw through Zhuowen's actions. He snorted and waved his right hand. Suddenly, countless black flames rushed out from his hand and turned into a huge black fire spear. With a whoosh, the spear pierced toward Zhuowen's heart. Unfortunately, the first mountain god's body was as fast as lightning. The instant the black fire spear was about to reach Zhuowen, he had already intercepted it. Then his right hand slashed down like a blade, directly cutting the black fire spear into two. "Your opponent is me." The first mountain god's gaze was as cold as a knife. He rushed toward the black armored man without hesitation. The black armored man narrowed his eyes but did not dare to be careless. The first mountain god gave him a very heavy pressure. "Zhuowen, leave this person to me. Absorb the gray bead. If your saint body can reach the perfect saint body, you won't have to be as cautious as before." The first mountain god's voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen nodded slightly. He summoned the blood immortal and asked her to protect him. Then Zhuowen sat cross-legged and began to absorb the gray gas in the gray bead. The moment Zhuowen absorbed the gray gas in the gray bead, the first mountain god and the black armored man started fighting. This black armored man was proficient in using black flames. These black flames were not ordinary. Not only did they possess a blazing high temperature, they also possessed an extremely potent poison. However, it was useless against the first mountain god's unparalleled physical body. The black armored man was crushed by the first mountain god right from the start. Fist suppressing mountains and rivers. The first mountain god roared and punched out. Countless ripples spread out in the surrounding space and smashed heavily on the black armored man's right hand. Kacha! The crisp sound of bones cracking could be heard. Then the black armored man let out a blood-curdling scream. The black armor on his body instantly shattered, revealing his body underneath. Beneath the black armor was a pitch-black skeleton. Only the head was left with flesh and blood. It was a dark-skinned young man. At this moment, his eyes were filled with fear. The first mountain god was too strong, especially his physical body. No matter what he did, he couldn't break through the defense of the first mountain god's powerful physical body. Furthermore, the black armored man's forehead had the same mark as Kong Wen's. However, the mark on his forehead was much dimmer than Kong Wen's. Die. The first mountain god's eyes were cold. He punched out again. As soon as he punched out, golden light exploded. It was as if the first mountain god punched out a small blazing sun instead of a fist. Boom. The punch directly hit the black armored man's body. Then, the pitch-black skeleton on the black armored man's body began to crumble and turn into black ashes. Bastard, I won't let you go even if I die, the black armored man roared, and the blue mark between his eyebrows suddenly lit up. Then the same thing happened to Kongwon. A blue exotic beast head suddenly rushed out, opened its mouth, and tried to swallow the first mountain god. The first mountain god's pupils shrank. However, after his previous experience with Kongwon, he naturally wouldn't clash head-on with the strange beast's head. Instead, he stepped on the air with his right foot and retreated backward with a serious look in his eyes. The moment the exotic beast head appeared, the mysterious eyeball in Zhuowen's collar rushed out again. With a blink of the eye, a black bolt of lightning rushed out and swallowed the exotic beast head. What? The black armored man, who only had his head left, was shocked. He couldn't help but cry out. He wanted to retreat, but his face suddenly turned pale. He spat out a mouthful of black blood and directly disintegrated into countless black ashes. Looking at the disintegrated black armored man, the first mountain god pondered. He knew that the exotic beast head that was swallowed by the mysterious eyeball was closely related to this black armored man. If the exotic beast head was destroyed, the black armored man would definitely die. What exactly is that strange beast's skull? The first mountain god became more and more curious. Whether it was the book immortal Kongwon or the black armored man, their strength was comparable to an early true immortal. It seemed that such experts were all controlled by the exotic beast head. Moreover, the first mountain god also realized that the exotic beast head was inseparable from the depths of the heavenly armor planet. As long as he could figure out what the exotic beast head was, he might be able to deduce what had happened here. If I want to know the truth, I'm afraid I can only go as deep as I can. I just don't know if he will keep his promise and give me that thing in the depths. The first mountain god looked at the end of the black desert and muttered these strange words in a low voice. The gray gas in the gray bead was too dense. Zhuowen absorbed it for a whole month, and the first mountain god also waited silently for a month. On this day, cracks began to appear on the surface of the gray bead. More and more cracks appeared, and finally it completely shattered. Then, the gray gas in the gray bead swept out and rushed into the Tianling acupoint on the top of Zhuowen's head. The moment the remaining gray gas entered Zhuowen's Tianling acupoint, Zhuowen abruptly opened his eyes. The dark gold color on the surface of his body suddenly shot out in all directions, forming a small golden rain in a radius of several dozen feet around his body. In the sky above the black desert, clusters of dense dark clouds began to gather. These dark clouds were very dense, and golden lightning constantly flashed between the dark clouds like golden snakes. The complete sacred body tribulation. The first mountain god said lightly. The sacred body tribulation was extremely important for Zhuowen. Although he had relied on the gray gas to forcibly increase the strength of his body to the extreme, reaching the threshold of the complete sacred body. However, Zhuowen's sacred body could only be considered to have reached the complete sacred body tribulation after going through such a powerful lightning tribulation. After all, a sword had to be sharpened. In order to make the sacred body a true expert, it had to be tempered by a powerful lightning tribulation. Zhuowen slowly stood up and looked at the dark clouds in the sky with burning eyes. He knew very well that as long as he went through this lightning tribulation, his sacred body would truly reach the complete sacred body. At that time, with the strength of his sacred body, Zhuowen would not be afraid of ordinary celestial immortals. Although he was not a match for peak celestial immortals like He Wuxiang and Wei Wuyin, it would not be so easy for them to kill him. It could be said that if he went through this lightning tribulation, he would be considered to be one of the top experts in the central region. This time, Zhuowen would be able to occupy a place in the depths of the underground. Thinking of this, Zhuowen laughed. He stomped his right foot on the ground and suddenly jumped into the sky, deep into the dark clouds in the sky. Sizzle. The moment Zhuowen jumped into the dark clouds, terrifying golden lightning kept moving inside the clouds. It was like countless golden pythons were entwining toward Zhuowen, trying to bind Zhuowen's entire body. However, Zhuowen let out a fierce howl. His muscles tensed up and his bones crackled. When the countless bolts of golden lightning struck him, he was like a ferocious beast, fearless. He punched out, directly meeting the countless bolts of golden lightning in the clouds. The first mountain god silently looked at the sky. The lightning tribulation did not last for long. It only lasted for 10 hours before the tribulation clouds disappeared. After the tribulation clouds disappeared, a figure suddenly fell from the sky and heavily smashed into the desert below, stirring up countless sand particles. The first mountain god dashed forward and saw a huge crater not too far away. Inside the crater, there was a figure that was completely charred black lying quietly. The first mountain god quietly looked. Suddenly, the charred figure's hands moved slightly. Then countless cracks appeared on the surface of the charred body. Golden light slowly leaked out from these cracks. Bang! The charred body slowly faded. Then within the countless golden lights, a stalwart figure slowly stood up. At that moment, the golden light on Zhuowen's body leaned toward the dark color. It gave off a subtle but powerful feeling. Zhuowen, congratulations on successfully advancing to the perfect saint body. The first mountain god said with a faint smile. Zhuowen cupped his fists toward the first mountain god and said, "It's all thanks to you that I was able to reach the perfect saint body so quickly." The first mountain god slightly nodded. Then he looked in front of the black desert and said, "This black desert is too big. When you were still cultivating, I checked the surroundings and found that there was no way out." Zhuowen slightly frowned. Even with the first mountain god's cultivation and speed, he still could not find a way out. This black desert was really strange. The first mountain god suddenly suggested. This mysterious eyeball swallowed the strange beast's head phantom between Kongwen's eyebrows. It also absorbed the strange beast's head phantom released by the black-armored man. That strange beast's head phantom was extremely unusual. It has a lot to do with this place. Maybe your mysterious eyeball can come in handy here. Zhuowen squinted his eyes and nodded. He said, "What you said is reasonable. Then I will try using this mysterious eyeball." After saying that, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and immediately took out the mysterious eyeball. The mysterious eyeball was extremely dissatisfied with Zhuowen's suggestion. It rolled its eyes at Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen did not care about the mysterious eyeball's emotions. Instead he said, "Can you take us out of here?" Chapter 1834. Black Wind. Zhuowen's eyes lit up when he saw the mysterious eyeball's reaction. Zhuowen and the first mountain god looked at each other, then stepped into the air and followed closely behind the mysterious eyeball. The black desert was so huge that it seemed to be boundless. They couldn't see the end of it. The black eyeball was extremely fast. It flashed by, leaving a black lightning shadow in the air. Zhuowen and the first mountain god followed closely behind. Furthermore, Zhuowen discovered that as he went deeper into the desert, the surrounding fire attribute energy became more and more intense. The scorching heat seemed to want to burn his entire body to a crisp. Fortunately, Zhuowen's body was extremely strong. Although it was uncomfortable, it didn't affect his body too much. Zhuowen and the first mountain god followed the black eyeball for 3 days. Finally, after 3 days, the black eyeball let out a sharp whistle and stopped in front of them. Zhuowen and the first mountain god's eyes lit up. They rushed to the side of the mysterious eyeball. Then they realized that there was a huge black hole in front of them. The hole was in the shape of a spiral. It went from the bottom to the top, layer by layer. It looked very strange and terrifying. In the middle of the hole was a deep black hole. It was only the size of a palm. Wisps of black smoke floated above the black hole. What is this? Zhuowen looked at the mysterious eyeball. He knew that it must have brought them here for a reason. The mysterious eyeball let out a soft hiss, its expression revealing excitement. Then, under Zhuowen's astonished gaze, the mysterious eyeball's pupils shrank, and a black bolt of lightning shot out, heading straight for the black hole at the bottom of the pit. When the black bolt of lightning shot out of the black hole, The surroundings suddenly trembled violently. Then Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He realized that the black hole was expanding continuously. When the black hole expanded to a few thousand meters, a violent black wind suddenly rushed out of the black hole. The black wind was too violent. It rushed into the sky at an extremely fast speed. Retreat! The first mountain god shouted, and immediately retreated a few thousand meters with Zhuowen. He stared at the black wind that suddenly appeared. The black wind was very strange. The moment it was formed, there were crackling sounds coming from the wind. Then Zhuowen noticed that there were dense black bolts of lightning in the black wind. These black bolts of lightning were the same as the black bolts that came out of the mysterious eyeball. Their power was extremely terrifying. Whoosh! The mysterious eyeball flew in front of Zhuowen and the first mountain god. Then it shot out black bolts of lightning again. Then it turned into black bolts of black lightning, Zhuowen and the first mountain gods. And black bolts of lightning. Then, the mysterious eyeball gave Zhuowen a look and looked at the terrifying black wind. Is it black wind? The first mountain god said. The first mountain god. Zhuowen nodded slightly. Soon after, under the guidance of the mysterious eyeball, he directly entered the interior of black wind. The mysterious eyeball once again burrowed into Zhuowen's collar. Crackle, crackle. Within the black wind, muffled sounds of lightning colliding resounded from time to time. The black lightning that was emitted caused Zhuowen's face to turn incomparably pale. He knew very well that if he did not have the protection of the black lightning around him, he would definitely die within the black wind. The black wind is moving upwards, the first mountain god said in a deep voice. Zhuowen also started to notice the black wind's movement. He saw the black wind fly upwards and hit the space above the black desert. Inside the black wind, countless black bolts of lightning were like firecrackers. They kept bombarding the barrier of nothingness above. Bang, bang, bang. Immediately, the entire space began to churn. Countless strands of black sand stirred up waves that were several 100,000 feet tall in the desert. The scene was too spectacular. The dense black sand filled the entire space of the desert. In an instant, the space became extremely dark. Everywhere one looked, there was only black sand. Crack. Suddenly, the terrifying black bolts of lightning and the black wind rushed into the void and bombarded the barrier above. Then a crisp cracking sound was heard. Then Zhuowen's pupil shrank. He saw countless fine cracks appear on the barrier of nothingness above. These cracks were getting bigger and bigger. Finally, the gap was infinitely enlarged and shattered into countless pieces. The moment the gap appeared, the black wind blew. The terrifying sound of lightning filled the entire space. The crackling sound was extremely ear-piercing. Then the entire space shook violently. Then, the cracks on the barrier of nothingness became bigger and bigger. They spread across the entire space of black sand. Boom! Countless black sand flew. Then, the moment the barrier of nothingness shattered, everything froze. It was as if time had stopped. However, this state of stillness did not last long. The space was collapsing. Everything in the space was collapsing and dispersing into nothingness. The moment the space shattered, the terrifying black wind brought Zhuowen and the first mountain god out of the Daokong space. This was a huge space filled with grasslands. The moment the black wind broke through the desert space, it arrived at a space filled with green grass. Zhuowen did not expect that there would be another space outside of the desert space. However, when the black wind arrived at this space, its raging power exploded again. This space was still like the desert space. It began to collapse. Then Zhuowen and the first mountain god followed the black wind into the third space. Bang! 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 The black wind was too terrifying. Wherever it passed, the space collapsed. Zhuowen and the first mountain god entered one space after another. It was as if they were reincarnating. As the spaces in the chess world collapsed one by one, the other spaces in the chess world were affected. The violent shaking was like an unprecedented earthquake, attracting the attention of the experts in other spaces. In a world of flames, two figures slowly walked on a path filled with flames. Suddenly, the countless volcanoes in the surroundings of the world of flames trembled violently. Terrifying streams of flame and magma spewed out, shooting straight into the 9 heavens. forming a terrifying momentum that could burn the heavens. Dou Hua's expression changed slightly. He stared at the terrifying tremors and abnormalities around him and said in a low voice, "What's going on? Why is the entire space shaking?" Elder Gu narrowed his eyes. His gaze seemed to pierce through other spaces. He said in a low voice, "I'm afraid that someone is destroying the small worlds in this strange place at an extremely fast speed. There are too many small worlds here. According to this old man's estimation, there should be hundreds of them. To be able to cause such violent tremors, I'm afraid that the speed at which this person destroys the small worlds is much faster than ours. Oh, could it be the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum? Let's go and take a look in the direction of the tremors," Dou Hua said in a low voice. After saying that, Dou Hua and Elder Gu tore through the world of flames and rushed toward the source of the tremors. In the world of the vast sea, the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum led the 4 true immortal Dao soldiers and flew across the sea. But soon, the tremors in the sea world caused the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and the other 4 to stop. "Who caused such a huge commotion?" Dongfang Qinxing asked in confusion. "This aura is terrifying and unfamiliar. I actually didn't sense this aura from any of the experts who entered before us," Beichen Ruoli said coldly. Within the coffin of the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum, a pair of eyes filled with vicissitudes seemed to pierce through layers of the void to see the black wind that was constantly destroying space. After a moment of silence, he said, "Let's go. Follow me." With that, the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum tore through space with his right hand and shot off in a certain direction. The 4 true immortal Dao soldiers didn't dare to tarry, and followed behind the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum. In a barren world overgrown with withered grass, Shurji's entire body was bathed in Buddhist light. He slowly walked through this barren world like a devout pilgrim. Suddenly, Shurji jerked his head up, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He clenched his right hand and the Buddhist light condensed into a Buddhist monk's blade. He slashed at the sky and a crack appeared in the surrounding space. Then he dove into the crack. At this moment, all the experts who were exploring other small worlds were attracted by the tremors and rushed towards the source of the tremors. This was a small world filled with icy cold rocks. In the sky above this small world, numerous black holes appeared. Then one figure after another rushed out from these black holes. The Divine Lord Dou Hua, Elder Gu, the 4 lords of the battlefield, and over 10 heavenly immortal realm experts had all appeared here. Not long after these people appeared in this minor world, another black hole blasted open in the distance, and then 10 black coffins flashed out from within the black hole. It was the 10 corpse kings. Bang! The instant the 10 corpse kings appeared, space collapsed and blazing Buddhist light illuminated everything. It was a Buddhist monk's blade that was filled with golden light. Shurji slowly walked out from behind the Buddhist monk's blade. Only the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum is left. Dou Hua looked around and chuckled. Just as he finished speaking, the largest mountain in the underground of the stone world suddenly collapsed. A black hole appeared at the bottom of the mountain. The huge stone statue of the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and the 4 perfected immortal Dao soldiers all rushed out. This should be the place that the black wind must pass through. Looks like everyone has the same idea as me. We want to see the truth of the black wind here. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum landed not far away from Shurji, but Dou Hua laughed heartily. Everyone who entered the depths of the underground is here. Why is the tremor still continuing? Could there be an even more powerful existence destroying the space of these small worlds? The Lord of Lunar asked with a frown. It should be. Now we just want to see who is destroying the space. To be able to destroy space at such a speed and affect other spaces, I'm afraid it's not simple, Dou Hua said with anticipation. Rumble. As soon as Dou Huagang finished speaking, the space around this world of rocks began to collapse. It was like shattered glass, shattering into pieces. It looked very strange. Then, a gust of black wind mixed with terrifying black lightning suddenly burrowed in through the countless cracks. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Everyone's gaze fell on the black wind. Then, everyone's face stiffened, and there was complete silence. Because through the black wind, they saw 2 figures in the black wind. Everyone was familiar with one of them. Chapter 1835. Life is like a game, and life is like a game of chess. Is that Zhuan? Do Hua came back to his senses and murmured in a low voice. Not only Do Hua, but the other experts present also recognized Zhuan, one of the two people hidden in the black wind. All of them revealed looks of disbelief. Shiji and the master of the divine mausoleum looked at each other, and both of them were shocked. They had many guesses at the moment when the entire chess world was shaken, but they had never thought that the source of the shock was related to Zhuan. How did Zhuan get in? Shiji frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice. Previously, he and the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum had already decided not to let Zhuan participate in this trip to the depths of the heavenly armor planet. This was because Zhuan was too weak, and it was too dangerous for him to enter the depths of the heavenly armor planet. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum was silent for a moment, then said, "The Abyss Saint Dragon should have told Zhuan about this place. Songjie is the master of the Abyss Saint Dragon after all. I have already considered this result, but I never thought that this boy would be able to break through so many small worlds in succession. It's because of that black wind. That black wind is extremely terrifying. It shouldn't have been released by Zhuan. Instead, it should have been created by that black-clothed man who was with Zhuan," Shiji said in a deep voice. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum sighed softly and said with some mixed feelings, "Perhaps. This boy is quite bold. He actually dares to enter this place." He Wushang revealed a trace of joy as he thought to himself. Not only He Wushang, but Wei Wuyin and the Master of Extreme Yin, who had a conflict with Zhuan, also revealed looks of joy. Originally, they had planned to settle old scores with Zhuan after exploring the depths of the heavenly armor planet, but now that Zhuan had also entered the depths of the heavenly armor planet, it was undoubtedly a happy occasion for them. If they could seize the opportunity, they might be able to get rid of Zhuan in one fell swoop. That would be the end of all troubles. However, the three of them were rather wary of the black-clothed man standing beside Zhuan. Their thoughts were the same as Shiji's. That terrifying black wind was definitely released by that black-clothed man. Therefore, while dealing with Zhuan, they had to secretly pay attention to that black-clothed man. This black wind might really be able to break through this strange place. Follow this wind. Do Hua's eyes flickered. After a moment of hesitation, he immediately gave chase. His right foot stepped on the air, and like a sharp arrow, he chased after the black wind that had broken open the stone world. Whoosh! Whoosh! The moment Do Hua gave chase, the others also followed closely behind. They turned into streaks of light that were extremely fast. In an instant, the shattered rock world became incomparably quiet and devoid of any signs of life. Not long after the crowd left, another three figures silently swept into this shattered world of rock. The man with the devil mask looked up and said faintly, "Let's follow them." As he spoke, the three of them disappeared from this shattered world like ghosts. The Black River slowly flowed. Above the Black River, a small wooden bridge quietly stood. On the small wooden bridge, two figures surrounded by black chi sat on both sides of a chessboard, silently playing chess. One of them held a black piece and gently placed it on the chessboard. A clear and melodious sound rang out. He smiled faintly and said, "This chessboard is simply an endless cycle. No matter how these intruders struggle, it is still difficult for them to escape from this cycle of reincarnation. Life is like a game, and life is like a game of chess. The two of us are the fates of these people. Without our permission, the chess pieces can't die, and they can't have any freedom." The person holding the white chess piece smiled and slowly placed it on the board. Bang! The moment the white piece landed on the chessboard, the entire chessboard suddenly trembled and shook. Then, the white piece that had just landed collapsed with a bang. The pupils of the two people in front of the chessboard shrank. They did not expect that the chess piece in the chessboard would actually explode. Bang! 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 The explosion of the white piece was like a chain reaction. Continuous sounds of explosions rang out. The chess pieces that had landed on the chessboard could not help but explode. "What's going on?" the person holding the black piece asked with a gloomy face. The person holding the white piece had a heavy gaze. He said, "Someone's breaking the chessboard with his own power. This speed is too fast. What kind of power does he need to do this?" The favorable situation of the chessboard was slowly reversed as the surrounding chess pieces exploded. As the number of chess pieces in the chessboard decreased, an aura that made one's heart palpitate came from within the chessboard. Stop him. The person holding the black piece had an extremely solemn expression. He picked up a black piece and placed it on the chessboard. The moment the black piece landed on the chessboard, an invisible ripple appeared on the surface of the chessboard. The fluctuation formed a ring-shaped ripple in the chessboard, just like ripples on the surface of water when a stone fell into it. The moment the black piece landed, the speed at which the chess pieces in the chessboard shattered slowed down. The person holding the white piece did not hesitate either. He picked up the white piece and placed it on the chessboard. The invisible fluctuation on the chessboard became even more intense. In a small world, the invisible ripple came from afar and landed on the black wind. It actually stopped the black wind from moving forward. What kind of power is this? It's actually stopping the black wind. The person in the black wind could not help but narrow his eyes when he saw that the black wind had actually stopped because of the invisible fluctuation. He had already experienced how strong the black wind was when it destroyed many small worlds. However, this invisible wave of energy was actually able to block the black wind. It really couldn't be underestimated. Hum. The mysterious eyeball hiding in Zhuowen's collar was immediately displeased when it sensed that the black wind had been stopped. Afterward, a powerful bolt of black lightning shot out from its eyes. The moment the black lightning merged with the black wind, the lightning in the black wind immediately became violent. The whistling sound was like the roar of a wild beast. It immediately broke through the obstruction of the invisible fluctuation and continued to advance. Bang! On the chessboard, the chess piece of the person holding the black chess piece exploded the moment he placed it down. Then, a strange black bolt of lightning shot out and drilled into the person's right hand. Bang! The man's pupils shrank and he retreated dozens of steps, almost out of the range of the wooden bridge. Then he waved his sleeve, an endless black fog spread out, turning into a huge black mouth, which swallowed the black lightning in one gulp. Crackle! Unfortunately, the black lightning was too terrifying. The moment it was swallowed by the big black mouth, it immediately surged and spread in the big mouth. With a bang, the big black mouth collapsed and the black lightning continued to rush toward the person with irresistible force. 7 kill cut. The person's eyes were extremely solemn. He grabbed with his right hand and took out a black machete from nowhere. Then he slashed out 7 times in a row. Each slash contained a strong killing power, and each slash was more terrifying than the last. When the 7 blades collided with the black lightning, the cunning and terrifying black lightning was finally shattered into pieces by the 7 blades. What kind of power is this? How can it be so difficult to deal with? The person holding the black piece muttered in shock while holding the machete. Just as the person holding the white piece was about to speak, the sounds of explosions suddenly came from the chessboard in front of him. They became more frequent and more terrifying. The speed at which the chess pieces exploded also became faster and faster, almost exceeding the expectations of the person holding the white piece. Boom! The moment the white piece in the center of the chessboard exploded, a terrifying storm rose above the chessboard and went straight to the dusky sky. Crack! This aura was too terrifying. Cracks began to spread from the center of the chessboard and eventually enveloped the entire chessboard. Then, under the sinister gazes of the two people, the chessboard suddenly shattered. The person holding the white piece looked extremely gloomy. Under this terrifying aura, he had no choice but to retreat from the range of the wooden bridge. Rumble! The moment the person holding the white piece retreated, a black storm swept out from the shattered chessboard. Then one figure after another rushed out of the cracks caused by the black wind. Within the black wind, Zhuowen lowered his head to look at the shattered chessboard under the wooden bridge. His eyes revealed a look of understanding. He knew that they had probably been in the world of the chessboard. In other words, they had entered the chessboard the moment they stepped into the hall. They had become chess pieces that constantly fought in the chessboard. Their fates were in the hands of the chessboard, and they could not control their own fates. The Divine Master Do Hua, the 4 masters of the battlefield, the 10 corpse kings, over a dozen heavenly immortal ancestors, the master of the divine tomb, and Shiji all rushed out from the cracks in the chessboard. After seeing the world outside the chessboard, they all revealed a look of understanding. Looks like the small worlds correspond to every intersection point on the chessboard. Only by destroying the intersection point at the center of the chessboard will the chessboard be broken. Dohua looked around, and then his gaze fell on the two figures that were shrouded in black mist below the wooden bridge. In the world outside the chessboard, apart from the endless black river, there was only the wooden bridge that crossed the black river. Apart from that, the surroundings were pitch-black mist. With Zhuowen's vision, he could naturally tell that the mist in the surroundings contained the power of a seal. The space here was enveloped by an extremely powerful seal. The black wind gradually died out. Zhuowen's gaze first fell on the two figures shrouded in black mist, and then he suddenly fixed his gaze on the other three figures. The leader of the three was a man wearing a devil mask. Two figures stood beside the man. They were naturally the lowly Yin Tianwei and Tian Chong, who had changed his appearance. Zhuowen stared coldly at the man with the devil mask. He asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" In the silent space, Zhuowen's words were like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, attracting everyone's attention. Their gazes moved back and forth between Zhuowen and the man with the devil mask. They were all guessing something. The man with the devil mask turned around and glanced at Zhuowen indifferently. He grinned. "Don't you already know who I am?" Chapter 1836. Black and White Giant. The masked man raised his eyebrows and glanced at Zhuowen indifferently. Then he shifted his gaze and slowly came to the side of the Divine Lord. "Dohua. You're really late," Dohua said with a frown as he looked at the masked man. He could sense that the relationship between the masked man and Zhuowen was not very pleasant. However, he did not care much about it. The reason why he invited the masked man to the primordial battlefield of the heavenly armor planet was mainly because he could persuade the prophet's family's divine daughter, Yin Tianwei, to join their camp. Dohua could not predict what was hidden underground in the primordial battlefield. Moreover, he could not grasp the dangers underground. However, the divine daughter, Yin Tianwei, who had the divination sacred talisman, was different. Although the divination sacred talisman could not completely predict the future, it could at least predict some of the disasters and blessings in the process of entering the primordial battlefield. This kind of divination ability was of great help to Dohua. The divine daughter, Yin Tianwei, was famous in the Central Plains for not giving face to anyone. Back then, Dohua had gone to the prophet's family to invite Yin Tianwei, but was rejected. However, the masked man suddenly appeared in front of him and promised to persuade the divine daughter, Yin Tianwei. The condition was that he would be given 2 spots to enter the primordial battlefield. Dohua naturally gladly accepted. As for the identity of the masked man, he naturally knew that he was Yang Yi, who had been the envoy of primordial chaos. Now is not the time to discuss this. Instead, we should ask the two in front where this place is, the masked man said indifferently. As soon as he said that, everyone withdrew their gazes and focused on the 2 figures shrouded in black fog on the other side of the wooden bridge. It seems that the 2 of you have been controlling this strange chess world. Now, if the 2 of you don't want to die, you'd better tell us where this place is and what's hidden in the depths of the primordial battlefield, Dohua said coldly. Although the 2 figures shrouded in black fog were strange, their auras were only around the mid-stage of the true immortal realm. Either Dohua or the Lord of the Divine Tomb could easily crush them. The 2 figures looked at each other and laughed out loud. The person holding the black chess piece laughed coldly. To tell you the truth, this is an underground maze. All of you will become delicacies for the 2 of us. What arrogance! One of the heavenly immortal realm experts snorted coldly, while his gaze was filled with disdain. They had an enormous advantage in numbers, and every single one of them was a peak expert of the Central Plains. So, what could a mere 2 people do to them? Whether or not I'm talking big is not something an ant like you can judge. The 2 figures laughed even more strangely. Then, they suddenly stretched out their left and right hands. Everyone looked over and saw that they were holding the black and white twins in their left and right hands. Ding! The black and white pieces suddenly collided with each other, producing a crisp and pleasant sound. This voice had a magical aura. The moment it rang out, everyone fell into a daze. Even Do Hua, a mid-stage true immortal expert, fell into a trance for a moment. The only ones who were clear-headed were probably the Lord of the Divine Tomb, the first mountain god beside Zhuowen, and the man with the ghost mask whose expression could not be seen. Whoosh! Then, the moment the black and white pieces collided, the two figures completely fused together, forming a strange black and white giant that was hundreds of meters tall. The fusion was completed in an instant. Just when everyone in the surroundings fell into a daze, the strange black and white giant grinned and faintly flashed to the front of the heavenly immortal realm expert who had refuted him earlier. The black and white giant's right hand suddenly clenched and directly grabbed the heavenly immortal realm expert. At this moment, the heavenly immortal realm expert had already woken up, and his eyes suddenly revealed a shocked expression. However, just as the shocked expression appeared on his face, it completely froze with a cracking sound. This was because the heavenly immortal realm expert's body was collapsing and shattering. It was as if he was made of porcelain, and countless dense cracks appeared on his body. When the heavenly immortal realm expert completely collapsed, the origin spirit in his dantian was directly sucked into the black and white giant's mouth and directly swallowed into its stomach. Whoosh! 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 When the heavenly immortal realm expert was instantly annihilated, the other heavenly immortal realm experts not far behind all gasped and retreated explosively. Wei Wuyin and He Wushang retreated even more swiftly, and their expressions were gloomy as they stared at the black and white giant that had a face of enjoyment. The origin spirit of a heavenly immortal is really delicious. The black and white giant smacked its lips, and its fierce gaze descended onto the other heavenly immortals, causing them to feel a chill. Zhuowen had also fallen into a daze from the sound from before, and it was even to the extent that the time he was in a daze was much longer than the other heavenly immortals. After all, his cultivation was the lowest here, and his resistance to the sound that could confuse heavenly immortals was naturally extremely low. However, fortunately, the first mountain god by his side woke Zhuowen up, otherwise, it would be impossible for Zhuowen to wake up so quickly. When Zhuowen woke up and his gaze descended onto the heavenly immortal realm expert, whose origin spirit had already been swallowed by the black and white giant, he couldn't help but gasp, and his gaze towards the black and white giant was filled with fear. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that when the black and white giant was chewing on the origin spirit, the rest of the light fell on him without leaving a trace. Obviously, the black and white giant had a deep impression of Zhuowen, who had broken the chess world. Moreover, Zhuowen also discovered that there was a mark between the black and white giant's eyebrows. However, the mark between the black and white giant's eyebrows was different from the ones he had encountered before. The marks between the eyebrows of the previous people were blue, but the mark between the eyebrows of the black and white giant was actually purple, and it actually revealed a trace of a mysterious and strange aura. Stop him! Do Hua's gaze was unsightly. He took a step forward with his right foot, and his right hand reached out into the void. With a flick of his finger, the power of countless stars in the sky instantly converged, and finally transformed into an extremely dazzling meteor. Falling star finger. As Do Hua's finger descended, the meteor tore through the void and suddenly fell towards the black and white giant. The black and white giant grinned, and his right hand formed a palm and raised upwards. Black and white chi surged out of his palm. This black and white chi transformed into the shape of a chessboard and blocked in front of him. Rumble! The meteor fell, and there was a terrifying explosion. Then Do Hua discovered that the falling star finger was actually unable to break the chessboard formed by the black and white chi. Hehe. I really want to have a taste of the primordial spirit of a true immortal. The black and white giant looked at Do Hua, and his eyes were filled with provocation. Do Hua's gaze was cold, and he used the falling star finger again. However, this time, the falling star finger that Do Hua used was much more powerful than before. The vigorous celestial core power gathered in the sky, and then countless meteors fell from the sky. Everyone, what are you still hesitating for? Help me capture this monster. Only then can we find out the exit of this so-called underground maze from him. Do Hua shouted coldly. The four lords of the battlefield rushed out without hesitation, and they were respectively on the four sides of the black and white giant. At that moment, The meteor shower had already fallen, and it enveloped the black and white giant's entire body, turning into a meteor cage. At the same time, the four lords of the battlefield also launched their attacks. Among them, the Lord of Taiyang wielded a large saber filled with yin qi, and he slashed down with a chilling saber qi from across the sky. Meanwhile, the Lord of Taiyang wielded a long spear that was as hot as the sun. With a shake of his right hand, the tip of the long spear emitted a blinding light. Then the light turned into countless golden spear shadows, and they were like countless golden hidden weapons that scattered out. The Lord of the Primordial Age's gaze was cold. He formed a seal with both hands, and instantly, the void behind him split open into countless black holes. Then countless huge stone tablets descended from these black holes, and each tablet was as terrifying as a mountain. Meanwhile, the Lord of Taishu waved his sleeve, and the surrounding void distorted, forming a huge void beast. The beast was at least 10,000 feet long, and as soon as it appeared, it dove down according to the Lord of Taishu's command. The moment the five attacked, the dozen or so celestial immortal patriarchs also used their own immortal techniques to attack the black and white giant below. Bang 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 bang. With so many attacks gathered on the black and white giant, the explosive power formed was absolutely unimaginable. Even the space around the black and white giant collapsed and distorted, turning into a vacuum zone. Zhuowen stared expressionlessly at the terrifying explosion below, and his heart trembled. The power of the explosion was too terrifying. He could imagine that if he was in the center of such an explosion, he would definitely die. Even if he had a perfect saint body, there was no possibility of survival. When the explosion slowly subsided, a bottomless pit appeared below. The pit was oval, and wisps of black smoke rose from the bottom of the pit. Around the pit, there were countless pieces of black and white flesh scattered. Obviously, in the explosion just now, the black and white giant had been blown into countless pieces. Seeing this scene, the expressions of Do Hua and the rest relaxed. However, their gazes quickly became gloomy because they discovered that the countless black and white pieces of flesh scattered in the pit were rapidly squirming. Very quickly, they once again condensed into the appearance of the black and white giant. You're not the only one who knows how to bully others with numbers. I know how to do it too. The black and white giant twisted its head. During the process of its neck twisting, it made a crackling sound, which made everyone feel cold. Do Hua, the four lords of the battlefield, and more than a dozen celestial immortal patriarchs joined forces to attack, but they still couldn't kill the black and white giant. What kind of monster was this? Swoosh swoosh swoosh. At the same time, after the black and white giant finished speaking, pairs of scarlet eyes suddenly appeared in the endless black fog around this strange space. After that, figure after figure emerged from the black mist. There were men and women, old and young. The only thing they had in common was that all of them had scarlet eyes, and all of them had the mark of a blue beast's head between their brows. What made Zhuowen even more fearful was that there were many of these strange figures that he couldn't see through, and those that he could see through were basically earth immortals. Chapter 1837. A fierce battle. Are all these people from the ancient times? Zhuowen stared at the figures that appeared from the surrounding black fog with a gloomy expression. The first mountain god's eyes flickered. In the end he nodded and said, "That is indeed the case." Moreover, they were all experts who had fallen in the Great War 10,000 years ago. I just don't know how they were resurrected. At this moment, Shiji and the Lord of the Divine Tomb arrived by Zhuowen's side. The Lord of the Divine Tomb remained silent, but Shiji said with a sunken face, "Zhuowen, why have you come here as well? I'm sure the Abyss Saint Dragon knows just how dangerous this place is, right?" Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Xiaohei has told me this before, but I still want to come. The underground of Heavenly Armor Planet is so mysterious. Perhaps there is something that can balance yin and yang." Shiji frowned slightly, but did not say anything else. He only looked at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. The Lord of the Divine Necropolis suddenly looked at the first mountain god standing next to Zhuowen and said, "You must have played a part in Zhuowen's visit, right?" The first mountain god did not look sideways as he faintly nodded his head. Shurji, on the other hand, sized up the first mountain god and asked in a deep voice, "And who are you?" The first mountain god said indifferently, "Now is not the time to question my identity. The puppets of the ancient powerhouses are about to attack us. We should think of a way to deal with them first." Whoosh, whoosh. As soon as the first mountain god finished speaking, the sound of something breaking through the air came from the front. They were so fast that they looked like afterimages. "Stop them." Do Hua's expression changed slightly as he hastily shouted and executed the falling star finger. Elder Gu followed closely behind, followed by the four lords of the battlefield, and the surrounding heavenly immortal patriarchs. Other than that, only the heavenly worm incarnation of the three people with the devil face mask who had been silent all this while made a move. Yang Yi and Yin Tianwei just stood quietly behind. Yin Tianwei was using the divination ability of the divination holy talisman to help the heavenly worm incarnation break through the surrounding obstacles. Zhuowen looked at Celestial Insect's avatar. Since Celestial Insect had completely changed, Zhuowen was unable to immediately sense Celestial Insect's presence. However, it still gave Zhuowen a sense of familiarity. Of course, this sense of familiarity did not allow him to guess the identity of the sky worm incarnation. Whoosh, whoosh. At the same time, the figures on the other side of the black fog flew towards Zhuowen like ghosts. "Stop them!" The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum coldly shouted. His huge stone arm hammered the ground, and the entire ground began to tremble. Then, 8 thick stone walls suddenly emerged from the depths of the ground. These 8 stone walls were not ordinary. Their surfaces were surrounded by ring-shaped gray gas. The gray gas was like a spiral, circling around each of the walls. It looked rather strange. Bang, bang, bang. The moment the 8 stone walls appeared, a strange, muffled sound rang out in the surroundings. Afterwards, the surrounding stone walls shook violently. Although the stone walls shook violently, they were extremely tough. They showed no signs of collapsing at all. Zhuowen looked at the surrounding stone walls, and his heart was filled with shock. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum really was a half-god after all. Just the stone walls he condensed were so powerful and terrifying. "This place is too strange. We need to find the exit, or we'll be trapped here forever," said the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum heavily. "Probably only the black and white giant knows the exit here," said Shurji. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum nodded, and then he raised his head. His gaze landed on the black and white giant behind the countless black figures, and he said indifferently, "Then I'll capture him." Swish. With that, the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum slowly vanished from where he was. His speed had basically reached a strange and unfathomable level. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly, because he had sensed an extremely familiar ripple of energy from the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum earlier. The ripple was the power of Wei intent. This group of people is really not simple. They actually forced me to release these failed parasites. Although the difference between these failed parasites and the successful ones is not small, their numbers are not small. I'm afraid it won't be so easy for these people to stop them. The black and white giant grinned. Then he took a step with his right foot and instantly disappeared from where he was. When he reappeared, he had mysteriously landed behind a celestial immortal, and then his right hand unceremoniously reached into the celestial immortal's back. The ear-piercing sound of a right claw piercing flesh continuously resounded in the surroundings. Then the celestial immortal's eyes widened, and after a miserable scream, his body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The origin spirit in his dantian was directly pulled out and swallowed. The death of this celestial immortal immediately caused the surrounding celestial immortals to be shocked and vigilant. They all retreated, trying to get as far away from the black and white giant as possible. Unfortunately, the surrounding puppets seemed to have gone crazy. They all entangled these celestial immortals, so that they did not even have a chance to retreat. "Want to escape? You'd better become my delicious meal, hee. The black and white giant laughed extremely eerily. His black and white eyes stared at the surrounding celestial immortals with greed. Swoosh swoosh. The black and white giant instantly turned into an afterimage, and then 2 more miserable screams were heard. The other 2 celestial immortals had completely fallen, and their origin spirits were completely swallowed by the black and white giant. Chaotic star cloud finger. A low voice was heard. Countless starlight burst out from Do Hua's body, and the figures that were pouncing on him were all dispersed. Do Hua, on the other hand, was like an arrow that had been released from a bow, quickly sweeping in front of the black and white giant. As his finger fell, the starlight exploded, forming an extremely long and huge nebula. This nebula was like a shuttle, enveloping the entire black and white giant. The enormous nebula's power came crushing down, as if it could crush any star. Chess world. The black and white giant shouted coldly, and its body spewed out the power of black and white. This power of black and white turned into two black and white lines, and suddenly shot into the air, constantly outlining an extremely vast chess game in the air. Bang bang bang. This huge chessboard was like the toughest cage, completely enveloping the black and white giants. When the chaotic star cloud finger came crashing down, the chessboard was as immovable as a mountain. It was in a stalemate with the black and white giants. Do Hua frowned slightly. This black and white giant was more difficult to deal with than he had expected. According to his conservative estimate, this black and white giant was at least at the middle stage of the true immortal realm, or even at the late stage of the true immortal realm. If I want to destroy this monster, do I have to use that thing? I just came in here not long ago, and if I use that thing, I'm afraid it's not good for me in the future. Do Hua's eyes flickered, and he was weighing the pros and cons. Although he was only at the middle stage of the true immortal realm, the Chaos Temple had such a long history, so he naturally had a trump card. He knew very well that if he used this trump card, the middle stage of the true immortal realm would definitely die. The late stage of the true immortal realm would definitely be seriously injured, and the peak stage of the true immortal realm would be evenly matched. With this trump card, Do Hua was not even afraid of the Lord of the Divine Tomb. Although the Lord of the Divine Tomb was indeed mysterious, and his strength might have reached the level of a demigod, the Lord of the Divine Tomb's injuries were too terrifying, and his demigod power could not be used too much. If Do Hua used his trump card, he definitely had a chance to fight the Lord of the Divine Tomb. Just as Do Hua was hesitating, the black and white giant laughed and said, "You want to trap me with this level of power? Ridiculous." As it spoke, a giant hand suddenly reached out from the chessboard around the black and white giant. This giant hand held a black chess piece and gently pressed it on the chessboard. Suddenly, the entire chessboard was filled with black, and the giant hand that placed the black chess piece was dyed black. It was like a devil's hand, and it suddenly reached out. Boom. This devil's hand that covered the sky and the sun suddenly slammed into the surrounding nebula. Then, Do Hua's face turned ugly as he realized that countless cracks had appeared on the surface of the nebula, as if it would collapse at any time. "Elder Gu, help me." Do Hua's face changed slightly, and he shouted in a low voice. Elder Gu's long beard fluttered in the wind, and he was dressed in a loose robe. He rushed to Do Hua's side, and his eyes were extremely serious. Then he formed a seal with both hands, and a surging mind power surged and spread around, like a vast ocean, enveloping the entire space. Myriad formation image. Elder Gu continued to draw in the void, and then a strange and unpredictable formation image appeared in the void. There were too many formation images. There were almost tens of thousands of them, and they covered the vast chessboard. As for the terrifying devil's hand that was constantly bombarding the surrounding nebula, the moment the myriad formation image appeared, its movements also stagnated. The black and white giant's eyes were indifferent. He stomped his right foot, and another white devil's hand reached out from the chessboard. This devil's hand held a white chess piece, and it quietly placed the white chess piece on the chessboard. Bang! Like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples, the moment the white chess piece landed on the chessboard, the entire black chessboard was covered by white. This strange white devil's hand suddenly reached out and blasted out. Crack! The nebula that was originally on the verge of collapse collapsed the moment the devil's hand reached out. The myriad formation image that was outside the nebula did not last long and also collapsed. Elder Gu let out a muffled groan, and he kept retreating. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were filled with shock. "Be careful." Do Hua rushed in front of Elder Gu, and with a wave of his sleeve, A surge of celestial core power swept Elder Gu away. At Elder Gu's original position, a black and a white hand reached out, and the surrounding space was instantly blasted into countless fragments, forming a vacuum. Elder Gu and Do Hua's faces turned ugly when they saw this scene. They knew that if they were hit by the black and white hands, they would suffer serious injuries. Swoosh! Swoosh! The black and white hands did not show any mercy. The moment they missed, they immediately turned around and continued to rush toward Elder Gu and Do Hua. However, the moment the black and white hands rushed out, the surrounding space instantly distorted, and the void where the black and white hands were located was isolated into an independent space. Do Hua and Elder Gu could not help but look in Yang Yi's direction. They saw Yang Yi withdraw his hands and nodded at them. Let's go. Chapter 1838. Shattering Scripture. Bang. 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 The independent space only lasted for a while before it completely collapsed. The black and white hands that were blocked by the independent space shot out like two bolts of lightning towards Do Hua, Elder Gu, and Yang Yi. Master of the Divine Tomb, you've been hiding here for so long. Are you still not going to make a move? Yang Yi said with a faint smile with his hands behind his back. Do Hua and Elder Gu looked to the other side. In fact, they had already sensed the arrival of the Master of the Divine Tomb, but they didn't say it out loud like Yang Yi. I won't waste my power on something like this. If the three of you can break the chessboard in the void and force the black and white freak to appear, I'll take action. And I'll only take action once. The indifferent voice was the voice of the Master of the Divine Mausoleum. Yang Yi narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, All right. Master God Elder Gu, let's work together. Do Hua and Elder Gu nodded. The Master of the Divine Tomb was definitely the strongest in this group. If they could force the Master of the Divine Tomb to make a move, they might really be able to destroy the black and white giant. Immortal Technique Infinite Void. Yang Yi pointed with his right hand. The void several hundred feet in front of him suddenly distorted and separated into an independent space. This independent space once again froze the black and white hands. Do Hua and Elder Gu didn't hold back at all. This time, Do Hua used all three immortal techniques: Falling Star Finger, Meteor Finger, and Chaotic Star Cloud Finger. The three immortal techniques were forcefully combined by Do Hua with a powerful secret technique. In the boundless nebula, the starlight shone brightly. Countless stars fell and meteors scattered, forming a huge meteor shower. This nebula seemed to have become a world of starlight. It was colorful and dazzling. Elder Gu's eyes were solemn. He clenched his hands and took out a scroll inlaid with countless jade stones from his spirit ring. Sun and Moon Universal Portrait. Elder Gu unfurled the scroll, revealing the sun, moon, stars, heaven, and earth. It was as if the scroll contained a rich and colorful world. Pieces of shining metacrystals were released from Gu's spirit ring. These metacrystals were added to the Sun and Moon Universe portrait, causing its power to reach a terrifying level. Two terrifying attacks instantly landed on the black and white hands that were enveloped by the independent void. A deafening and terrifying sound filled the surroundings. As the aftershock spread out, the flickering human figures nearby were all annihilated and scattered under the influence of this frightening aftershock. They did not even have the chance to struggle. On the other hand, the four masters of the battlefield, the other heavenly immortal realm experts, and the 10 corpse kings retreated successively because the aftershock was too terrifying. And if they were to approach it, they would probably suffer heavy injuries as well. Still not broken? Yang Yi took a step forward with his right foot. Like an arrow leaving the bowstring, he instantly entered the terrifying aftermath. Then he grabbed with his right hand, and the surrounding void distorted again. At the same time, black cyclones appeared around the distorted space. These cyclones twisted together with the space, and eventually formed a terrifying giant dragon that was thousands of feet long. Immortal Technique, Void Dragon. Yang Yi stood at the head of the Void Dragon. Then, with a stomp of his right foot, the Void Dragon roared at the sky and directly entered the independent void. Meanwhile, Gu and Do Hua's terrifying attacks were multicolored and colorful, and they completely drowned Yang Yi's figure. After about 10 breaths of time, the independent space collapsed with a bang, and a huge void dragon rushed out, rushing towards the black and white giant in front of it as fast as lightning. Interesting. The black and white giant narrowed his eyes. It was beyond his expectations that Do Hua, Gu Gu, and Yang Yi could actually break through his black and white hands. Unfortunately, this little bit of attack is useless against me. As he spoke, the black and white giant pinched his fingers together and took out a black and white pair of twins. Then he suddenly threw them forward. The black and white twins rapidly flew in the air and turned into black and white tracks. The moment the black and white twins arrived in front of the void dragon, they suddenly burst out with two extremely blazing rays of black and white light. Then the two rays of light constantly wriggled and fused, finally combining into a giant black and white dragon. As soon as the giant black and white dragon formed, it unceremoniously bit at the void dragon. Its power was far greater than the void dragon's, and it actually almost crushed the void dragon's neck in an instant. Yang Yi's pupils shrank slightly. His right foot lightly stepped on the void, and he immediately left the void dragon. Boom, boom, boom. The moment Yang Yi left, the giant black and white dragon swung its tail and wrapped around the void dragon. With a sudden force, the void dragon wailed and collapsed inch by inch. Master of the Divine Tomb, are you still not going to act? Yang Yi said indifferently. Whoosh. As soon as Yang Yi finished speaking, 4 giant figures suddenly appeared in the surrounding void. These 4 figures were all tall stone statues. They were the 4 tomb guards of the Divine Tomb. Dongfang, Nangong, Beichen, Shimen, the 4 of you form the 4 symbols formation. The Master of the Divine Tomb's indifferent voice rang out. The 4 tomb guards each unleashed a terrifying power. Then, a beam of light shot out from each of the tomb guards. The 4 beams of light were of different colors. The east was cyan, the south was red, the west was white, and the north was black. The moment the 4 beams of light of different colors shot into the sky, they converged into 4 thick chains of different colors. Clang. The thick chains swept out and smashed heavily on the illusory chessboard surrounding the black and white giant. Then, the black and white giant's pupils shrank as it found that the surface of the chessboard had begun to crack. Bang, bang, bang. After the first strike, the chains quickly smashed out one after another. Instantly, more and more cracks appeared on the surface of the illusory chessboard. Finally, the cracks spread throughout the entire chessboard. The moment the chessboard collapsed, the thick chains swept out like a giant dragon, trying to completely bind the black and white giant. The black and white giant's eyes were gloomy as it retreated rapidly. At the same time, it summoned the black and white dragon from the other side. This black and white dragon was truly amazing. It pounced over without fear of death, and actually completely blocked the strange chain for a moment. The black and white giant breathed a sigh of relief, but soon, an ominous premonition rose in its heart. Then it only heard the terrifying sound of wind whistling behind it. The sound of the wind was very soft, but it was like an explosion in the black and white giant's ears. The sense of crisis in its heart came from the sound of the wind. Retreat! The black and white giant growled. It clenched its right hand and swiped it behind its back. Suddenly, the black and white chi outlined the illusory image of a chessboard behind it. Boom! Unfortunately, as soon as the illusory image of the chessboard was formed, it shattered instantly. Then a huge fist came whistling and blasted directly toward the black and white giant's chest. It was so fast that it exceeded everyone's expectations. Trap! The black and white giant's eyes flickered. Suddenly, many small bumps appeared on its body. If one looked carefully, they were black and white chess pieces that rushed out of its body. There were many chess pieces that rushed out, and they were constantly arranged in the void. They were extremely fast, as if someone was holding these chess pieces and constantly arranging them. After all the arrangements were displayed by these chess pieces, the illusory image of a mountain appeared in front of the black and white giant. Bang! The fist rushed over in an instant and blasted the mountain, shattering it with a single punch. However, after the mountain was shattered, another mountain rose from the ground and blocked the fist again. Bang! 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 Mountains were pierced through one after another, and new mountains rose up one after another. It was as if there was no end to the mountains, forming a never-ending trap. The black and white giant's gaze fell on the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum. He frowned slightly. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum had restrained his aura before, so he didn't pay much attention to him. But now, the aura that the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum had erupted with made him feel a little frightened. This was not something that an ordinary true immortal could compare to. A demigod. But the power that he's exerting doesn't seem to have reached the level of a demigod. The black and white giant's eyes became incomparably fearful. He immediately guessed the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum's cultivation level, but he was surprised that the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum didn't use too much strength this time. Scripture of Annihilation. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum said indifferently. Then he pointed at the void with his right hand. Immediately, surging immortal core power gushed out, forming strands of black energy with the power of annihilation. These black energy strands were not simple. They contained the power of annihilation. Moreover, the black energy strands condensed one after another, forming a black storm that blasted on the trap. Instantly, the mountain with the ability to regenerate was shattered into nothingness by the black storm. With the trap broken, the black and white giant's face turned pale. He suddenly bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of essence blood. He said in a deep voice, "Death trap." The chess pieces in the void changed again. Countless saber lights and sword shadows flashed, and an incomparably huge battlefield appeared in the area covered by the chess pieces. This battlefield was filled with a terrifying murderous aura. Unfortunately, the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum did not intend to hold back at this moment. The black energy condensed by the Scripture of Annihilation transformed into a huge black saber that slashed down from the sky, shattering the battlefield formed by the death trap. As the saber slashed down, an incomparably huge saber aura swept toward the black and white giant like a shadow. It was so fast that it was like a meteor. Slash. The saber aura swept past in an instant. The black and white giant only had time to move sideways. The saber aura instantly slashed across his right hand, and then his right hand soared into the sky and was shattered into nothingness. The black and white giant's regenerative ability was terrifying, but the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum used the power of the Scripture of Annihilation, a power that could destroy everything into nothingness. The black and white giant's regenerative ability was completely useless. Whoosh. Chapter 1839. Shatter the black and white giant's pupils constricted. He felt the threat of death, and his eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the Lord of the Divine Tomb. There was no doubt that the Lord of the Divine Tomb had fully displayed the power of a demigod. Although the black and white giant was strong, there was still a large gap between it and a demigod. Damn it, I won't die here. If anyone is going to die, it's you intruders. The black and white giant growled. His body suddenly swelled and then exploded. Countless pieces of black and white flesh splattered in all directions. The moment the black and white giant collapsed into countless pieces of black and white flesh, the countless figures who were fighting in the surroundings surprisingly stopped in unison. Then these figures rushed up into the sky as if they had gone mad. What are they doing? Zhuowen stared at the countless figures gathering in the sky from the 8 rock walls, and a trace of uneasiness rose in his heart. Countless figures gathered and merged in the sky, finally forming a huge black vortex. As more and more figures gathered in this space, the black vortex's surface area continued to expand. The Lord of the Divine Tomb frowned slightly, because the black and white giant had self-detonated in advance and collapsed into countless pieces of black and white flesh. The blade of annihilation did not hit the giant at all. It's not that easy to escape. The Lord of the Divine Tomb's voice was filled with indifference. He pointed with his right hand, and the blade of annihilation was annihilated, turning into countless small black knives. These small black knives shot out like sharp arrows, piercing towards the collapsed pieces of black and white flesh. Bang bang bang. Every piece of black and white flesh that was pierced by the small black knives was completely annihilated. At the same time, the black and white giant's miserable cries rang out in the surroundings. Bastards, you intruders, remember this. I will never let you go. Even if I have to sacrifice all the failed parasites here, I will kill you all. The black and white giant's vicious voice echoed in everyone's ears. For a moment, an ominous premonition rose in everyone's hearts. The Lord of the Divine Tomb narrowed his eyes. Although the Blade of Annihilation had destroyed most of the black and white giant's flesh, a small part of it still escaped. With the giant's regenerative ability, it probably wouldn't die at all. As long as it was given enough time, it could recover again. Look, the black vortex in the sky is shattering. What a terrifying power. Suddenly, someone pointed at the black vortex formed by the fusion of countless strange human figures. Zhuowen also looked in that direction and saw countless cracks on the surface of the vortex. As more and more cracks appeared on the surface of the whirlpool, a destructive force swept out. This force was getting more and more terrifying. The moment the black whirlpool completely collapsed, the black whirlpool suddenly collapsed. This destructive power underwent an earth-shattering change. A huge whirlwind swept out from the collapsed vortex. This whirlwind was too terrifying, as if it could annihilate all living things. Do Hua, Old Man Gu, and Yang Yi's expressions changed slightly as they quickly retreated, distancing themselves from the whirlwind that could tear everything apart. Besides that, the four masters of the battlefield and the other heavenly immortal realm experts left this place with astounded expressions. Miserable shrieks suddenly rang out. Because two heavenly immortal patriarchs were a step too slow, they were immediately swept into the whirlwind that could shatter heaven and earth. The shrieks stopped abruptly as the two heavenly immortal patriarchs were directly shattered. Even the primordial spirits in their dantians were unable to survive. This scene caused everyone to feel a chill in their hearts, especially the other heavenly immortal patriarchs. Their eyes were filled with shock as they quickly retreated, distancing themselves from this terrifying whirlwind. The 8 walls that were originally arranged around Zhuowen and the first mountain god instantly cracked upon contact with the collapsing force of the black whirlwind. Then they collapsed. The first mountain god narrowed his eyes. He waved his right sleeve and immediately retreated with Zhuowen out of the range of the black whirlwind. Shiji followed closely behind. For a moment, everyone in the surroundings dispersed and distanced themselves from the terrifying whirlwind. Their eyes narrowed into needles as they stared at the whirlwind that was getting more and more terrifying. The black whirlwind whistled out and immediately caused the entire space to tremble violently. Then countless cracks appeared in the surrounding space. Rumble. This tremor was too terrifying. Not only was it transmitted within this space, but it was also transmitted outside the space. The entire heavenly armor planet was trembling violently. The cracks on the surface of the heavenly armor planet, which was already riddled with holes, were increasing continuously. What's going on? What's going on inside the heavenly armor planet? In a barren desert, Ji Qinyan took a step forward and flew into the sky. Looking at the countless howling yellow sandstorms around her, her beautiful eyes were filled with shock. In particular, the terrifying tremor that came from the depths of the earth caused Ji Qinyan's beautiful eyes to be filled with uncertainty. The tremor was too intense. Ji Qinyan could even clearly hear her own heartbeat being deeply affected by the tremor. Not only Ji Qinyan, but the other cultivators in various places of the heavenly armor planet were also shocked. They all flew into the sky, not daring to come into contact with the crumbling surface of the heavenly armor planet. As for some unlucky cultivators, because they were closer to the Black Lake, where the tremor was the strongest, they were caught off guard and instantly turned into dust. Even their primordial spirits couldn't escape. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, in the sky above the mysterious space deep underground, the cracks in the black vortex that was constantly rotating almost spread all over its body. Then it directly collapsed, and an unimaginably terrifying power spread out in all directions. Then, an impact force spread out in all directions like a monstrous tsunami. In an instant, the entire mysterious space was filled with it. Many heavenly immortal patriarchs, who had retreated to the edge of the space, were pale as snow when they came in contact with the terrifying impact force. Then they spat out a mouthful of blood and hurriedly used all their skills to resist the powerful impact force. However, the impact force was too terrifying. Even if these heavenly immortal patriarchs used all their skills, they were still barely able to resist it. Among them, Ji Wubing of the Immortal Clan, He Wuxiang of the Wangren Clan, Wei Wuyin of the Beast Envoy Clan, Dong Fangxin of the Heavy Shield Clan, and Kong Lianshuan of the Blood Sacrifice clan all took out their respective saint talismans. With the help of the saint talismans, the 5 of them were in a much better condition than the other heavenly immortals. However, it was still obvious that they were barely holding on. Bang! 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 On the other side, 5 of the 10 corpse kings' coffins directly exploded, and 5 corpses with dense death chi walked out from within. The 5 corpses growled as they constantly resisted the terrifying impact force. Bang! 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 Unfortunately, the 5 corpses did not resist for long before they were directly blasted into powder by the terrifying impact force. They were dead to begin with, and it was only because of their coffins that their corpses were perfectly preserved. Once their coffins were destroyed, they were actually much weaker than ordinary celestial immortals. Now, under this terrifying impact, there was no way for them to survive. The other 5 corpse kings were greatly shocked. The death chi on the surface of their coffins became denser and denser, as they tried their best to resist the terrifying impact force from the surroundings. The cultivation of the 4 lords of the battlefield, Do Hua, Old Gu, and the others was far superior to the others. Resisting the impact force at the edge of the area was not too much of a problem. Zhuowen, be careful. The first mountain god stood in front of Zhuowen, and resisted the powerful impact force from the front with his powerful body. All of you must die. When everyone barely managed to stand firm under the impact force, a resentful voice suddenly sounded, and then everyone heard the sound of glass shattering. Crack! Crack! The sound of glass shattering became denser and denser, almost converging into an ear-piercing symphony. Do Hua's pupils shrank as he said in a low voice, "This space is completely shattered. That guy is so ruthless. In order to annihilate us, he actually intends to shatter this entire space." Unfortunately, as soon as Do Hua finished speaking, the space completely collapsed. Gusts of void storms rushed into the sky, covering the world as if the end of the world had arrived. The moment the space shattered, the impact force that had originally spread in all directions suddenly became even more terrifying. There were only 9 heavenly immortals left, but 4 of them could not withstand this terrifying force and all of them collapsed and were annihilated. Even their primordial spirits did not escape. As for He Wuxiang, Ji Wubing, and the other 4, with the help of the holy talisman, although they all spat out a mouthful of blood, they still managed to withstand it. Of the remaining 5 corpse kings, 4 of them had their coffins shattered, and the corpse kings had also died unnatural deaths. For a moment, only the first corpse king was still bitterly holding on among the 10 great corpse kings. Not only them, but Do Hua and the other true immortals also began to struggle. Boom! Suddenly, the entire space exploded, and then the others who were still struggling to hold on were scattered and flew out of the shattered space. Even experts at the level of the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and Do Hua were no exception. The first mountain god, who had been blocking in front of Zhuowen, groaned, and his stalwart body involuntarily flew out. The moment the first mountain god flew out, Zhuowen immediately displayed his perfect sacred body, and at the same time, formed the gate of reincarnation with millions of underworld water droplets, blocking in front of him. Puff! The impact force swept over, but the gate of reincarnation only lasted for a few breaths of time before the impact force slammed heavily on Zhuowen's body. A sharp pain filled Zhuowen's entire body, and he felt as if his whole body was being torn apart. Then he flew out in another direction. When everyone was sent flying out of the space, the originally fragmented space suddenly exploded. An unimaginable explosive force spread out in the space with a loud bang. When the people who flew out saw the space explode, a look of relief appeared in their eyes. However, the aftermath of the space explosion was not so easy to resist, and many people were seriously injured by the explosive force. Puff! Chapter 1840. Imbuement. After the space shattered, the people who were sent flying discovered that their surroundings were filled with distorted 7-colored light. On the surface of these 7-colored lights, countless lights were wriggling, and within these lights, there should be many restrictions. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. When the figures who were sent flying came into contact with the 7-colored light at the edge, they all disappeared. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale as he landed on a seven-colored light. Then he felt a suction force surrounding his body. Next he felt as if he was passing through space. Zhuowen wanted to lift his eyelids, but he discovered that his eyelids were exceptionally heavy, as if they were filled with lead. Zhuowen's eyes continued to struggle. In the end his eyes opened a slit. Then, an illusory figure appeared in front of him in the distance. This figure sat on a throne in the depths of a large hall. Flickering candlelight floated in front of this figure. However, these candlelight were too dim, as if they would be extinguished at any time. Through these candlelight, Zhuowen discovered in shock that the surroundings of the hall where this figure sat were actually filled with countless black veins. These black veins varied in thickness, as if they were the meridians of a human body. They constantly pulsed as if they were alive. Looking at these pulsing black veins, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He felt a strong sense of danger from these black veins. It was as if he might die if he came into contact with these black veins. The figure sitting on the throne seemed to have sensed something. He raised his head and his gaze landed on Zhuowen. The moment this gaze landed on Zhuowen, Zhuowen felt his body explode. He stared at this gaze. From this gaze, he saw endless deathly stillness and a terrifying aura and power that could shake one's soul. It was as if the owner of this gaze would completely destroy him if he revealed even the slightest bit of killing intent. The moment this gaze focused on Zhuowen, he felt a vast and terrifying power sweep over him. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and flicked his right hand. Immediately, countless yellow springs water droplets flew out and turned into a huge gate of reincarnation in front of him. Bang bang bang. Continuous muffled sounds came from the gate of reincarnation. Then, Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he discovered that the surface of the huge gate of reincarnation was instantly covered with countless cracks. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan and retreated. His expression was extremely gloomy. The moment Zhuowen retreated, the gate of reincarnation collapsed. Zhuowen frowned as he stared at the mysterious figure in front of him. The mysterious figure opened his eyes slightly and stared indifferently at Zhuowen. Then he slowly raised his right hand. A white light floated in his right hand, and a hexahedral crystal quietly floated in the white light. Whoosh! The white light was like an arrow that had been released from a bow. It instantly cut through the spatial barrier, and finally landed in front of Zhuowen. When the white light passed through countless barriers and finally arrived in front of Zhuowen, Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief. He stopped in his tracks and silently stared at the white crystal floating in front of him. His eyes flickered. He slowly stretched out his right hand and held the white crystal in his hand. He only felt a cold feeling coming from his palm. Then his entire body felt refreshed. Zhuowen raised his head and looked at the mysterious figure. However, he discovered that the mysterious figure and the hall that the mysterious figure was in were slowly disappearing. After the mysterious figure and the ancient hall disappeared, a powerful suction force came from below. Then Zhuowen was pulled down by the suction force. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he discovered that he was in a vast ocean. Looking around, he found that other than this vast ocean, there was no land or island. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of contemplation. Then he took a step with his right foot and quickly disappeared from the spot like a rainbow. After flying in this vast sea for half a day, Zhuowen discovered that there was nothing at all. Let's check this white crystal first. And who was that mysterious figure that appeared? Why did he give this white crystal to me? Zhuowen's gaze fell on the white crystal. Then he discovered that on the surface of the white crystal, there was a white whirlpool. Zhuowen's attention was immediately attracted by the white whirlpool. After pondering for a while, Zhuowen decided to explore the white whirlpool with his consciousness. After summoning the Blood Immortal and instructing her to protect him, Zhuowen set up a powerful restriction around him. Then he sat cross-legged in the air and slowly explored the white crystal with his consciousness. This aura. The moment Zhuowen's consciousness entered the white crystal, an extremely strong aura exploded from the white crystal. As soon as this aura exploded, Xiaohe, who was hiding in Zhuowen's sea of consciousness, suddenly jumped up. Whoosh! Xiaohe came out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Its eyes stared at the white crystal. It muttered in a low voice, "Master." Master's aura. Because Zhuowen's consciousness was all in the white crystal, he did not hear Xiaohe's words. At this moment, Zhuowen's consciousness was spread inside the white crystal. He kept wandering in the white world. After an unknown amount of time, at the end of the white world, a stalwart figure slowly appeared in front of Zhuowen. The imposing figure was a middle-aged man. He wore white clothes, and his eyes were bright and full of expression. It was as if his eyes contained the endless sun and moon of the universe. When Zhuowen's eyes met with this person's, there was an explosion in his mind. He could not help but take a few steps back. He frowned as he looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. He sensed a familiar aura from this person. He had sensed this aura from the mysterious figure that had mysteriously appeared in front of him before. Second child of destiny, hello. The middle-aged man smiled at Zhuowen. Zhuowen stared at the middle-aged man and said in a deep voice, "Child of destiny? What on earth is that?" The middle-aged man did not think much of it. He slowly explained, "The so-called child of destiny is actually the child of destiny. It is also the person that I calculated with my lifetime's effort. You were able to obtain the Fuxi cauldron, so you are the child of destiny." Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He had obtained the Fuxi cauldron from Earth. His transmigration was closely related to the Fuxi cauldron. Now, the middle-aged man said that the person who possessed the Fuxi cauldron was the child of destiny. Did that mean that Zhuowen's transmigration was also arranged by this person? You don't have to be confused. It was not my arrangement that you came to the heavenly armor continent. It was destiny because I did not know the whereabouts of the Fuxi cauldron back then. I only know that the person who obtained the Fuxi cauldron must be the child of destiny. The middle-aged man said indifferently. Senior, who are you? Zhuowen asked with a frown. The middle-aged man looked melancholy and said, I am Songjia. Originally, I was sincerely happy that the second child of destiny had appeared. However, your cultivation is too low. You are still far from being able to grow. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Zhuowen felt as if his mind had exploded. His pupils constricted as he stared at the middle-aged man and muttered in a low voice. Songjia, the master of Shaohe, the strongest person in the heavenly armor continent back then? He carefully looked at the middle-aged man in front of him, and realized that this middle-aged man was indeed very similar to the stone statue of Songjia in the main hall. Little guy, everything is predestined. You obtained the Fuxi cauldron and followed it to this place. I'm afraid it was destiny's arrangement, right? Songjia stared at Zhuowen in front of him with a complicated gaze. Then, he pointed a finger with his right hand and pointed between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Zhuowen wanted to dodge, but Songjia's strength was too strong. He could not move at all. He could only watch as Songjia's right finger pressed between his eyebrows. What do you want to do? Zhuowen asked vigilantly. Songjia was silent. A surge of power swept from Songjia's fingertip into Zhuowen's eyebrows and entered his body. With the influx of this power, Zhuowen felt that the celestial core power in his body was constantly increasing. This increased celestial core power was like rivers flowing into the sea into Zhuowen's dantian. Boom. About half a day later, Zhuowen's aura reached its peak. Then, like a volcanic eruption, the aura around him surged up and turned into an invisible terrible storm, constantly sweeping around. The peak of the earthly immortal realm. Feeling the sudden increase in his aura, Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. He knew that Songjia might have enlightened him, and made his cultivation break through to the peak of the earthly immortal realm. At this moment, there was a touch of exhaustion on Songjia's face. However, he did not stop. Instead, he poured the remaining power into Zhuowen's body without hesitation. Zhuowen groaned. Too much power gathered in his body, making Zhuowen feel that his whole body was full of swelling. This feeling was very painful. Hold on. Songjia's tired voice came. Zhuowen's eyes showed a firm expression. He knew that since Songjia continued to enlighten him, it should be to help him break through to the fairy immortal realm. Therefore, he endured the pain. At the same time, the celestial core power in his body ran extremely fast, digesting the surging power that suddenly poured into his body. For 3 days and 3 nights, Zhuowen endured the intense pain. After enduring for 3 days and 3 nights, his clothes were already drenched in sweat, but Zhuowen didn't feel it at all. Boom. Finally, on this day, Zhuowen's aura soared countless times again. And this time, it was much more powerful than before. The Blood Immortal, who was guarding Zhuowen, naturally noticed this scene. Her pupils shrank as she stared at Zhuowen. She could not help but retreat dozens of steps and said, "No way. 3 days ago, Master just broke through to the peak of the earthly immortal realm. Is he going to break through again?" As soon as the Blood Immortal's voice fell, all the restrictions set by Zhuowen around them collapsed. The vast aura swept up a terrifying whirlwind in the sky. This whirlwind was so horrible that the Blood Immortal did not dare to approach it. It was as if she would be torn to pieces if she approached. Chapter 1841. Zhanbai, however, just as the heavenly tribulation was about to descend, the white crystal in Zhuowen's palm burst out and rushed directly into the clouds. Not long after the white crystal rushed into the clouds, the heavenly tribulation that was brewing in the clouds collapsed with a loud bang. The condensed heavenly tribulation also disappeared without a trace. I have helped you offset the heavenly tribulation. You can only rely on yourself now. I don't have much time left. When I enlightened you just now, most of the maps of this place have been transmitted into your sea of consciousness. Little guy, I hope you can reach where I am soon. The moment Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes, a blazing light burst out from his eyes. Songjia's faintly discernible voice also sounded in his mind. After Songjia's voice disappeared, the light on the surface of the white crystal that had absorbed the heavenly immortal's heavenly tribulation faded, and it returned to Zhuowen's hand. In Zhuowen's mind, an extremely complicated topographic map gradually appeared. He glanced at it and found that this topographic map was the topographic map of the depths of the heavenly armor star. It also included the underground maze that the black and white giant had mentioned. Whoosh! Xiaohe rushed to Zhuowen and said excitedly, "Zhuowen, that white crystal has my master's aura. Did you see my master?" Zhuowen glanced at Xiaohe and said in a deep voice, "I did see Songjia. He even helped me break through my cultivation." Zhuowen told Xiaohe everything that had happened in the white crystal. Xiaohe looked even more excited. "Master is still alive. We must find him," Xiaohe said firmly. "Don't worry. Lord Songjia told me to find him. I will definitely find him. However, after looking at the topographic map he gave me, I found that the hall where Lord Songjia is at is quite far from here. We need to leave the underground maze first," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Xiaohe nodded and looked at Zhuowen with gratitude. "Zhuowen, thank you." Zhuowen smiled and said, "Is there a need to say these things between us?" With that, Zhuowen's eyes fell on the endless sea around him. According to the topographic map Songjia had instilled in him, this sea should be formed by a powerful ancient formation. As long as this ancient formation was broken, the sea would be broken. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's thinking, he remembered that the formation eye of this vast sea, formation's formation should be somewhere in the depths of the sea. When Zhuowen dived into the sea, at another bottom of the sea, a figure seemed to feel something and suddenly broke out of the water. I should be right. That's the aura of the celestial immortal thunder tribulation. This time, only Zhuowen is below the celestial immortal realm. Tut-tut. I'm in luck this time. I can't believe that I came here with that little bastard Zhuowen. The figure gave a ferocious smile. Like an illusory black shadow, it suddenly broke out of the sea and plunged into the depths of the sea, in the direction where Zhuowen had gone. In the dark depths of the sea, Zhuowen was like a flexible fish, shuttling back and forth in the depths of the sea. When Zhuowen came to the bottom of the sea, what appeared in front of him was a stretch of bony seabed reefs. Among these reefs, there was a huge arched door. Zhuowen quietly stared at the arched door surrounded by countless reefs, a look of contemplation in his eyes, and he said in a deep voice, "This should be the source of the ancient restriction." With that, Zhuowen made a seal with his right hand, and countless runes rushed out, forming rune chains. There were so many rune chains that they instantly bound the arched door. "Break!" Zhuowen shouted coldly, and the rune chains suddenly tightened. Then the arched door vibrated violently, and then countless cracks appeared on its surface. Crack! Finally, when the cracks spread throughout the door, the arched door collapsed and shattered. Crash! The moment the door shattered, The entire ocean began to roll and roar unscrupulously. The entire world of the ocean began to crack under the raging waves. Boom, boom, boom. The moment the sea shattered, a huge black hole appeared under the broken door. And Zhuowen drilled into the black hole without hesitation. The moment Zhuowen drilled into the black hole, the figure also rushed over. The person saw Zhuowen drilled into the black hole at a glance and shouted angrily, "Zhuowen, let's see where you're going." Zhuowen, who drilled into the black hole, felt a powerful suction force. The moment he completely entered the black hole, he immediately heard the angry shout. He raised his head slightly, his gaze fell on the figure, and his pupils shrank. He Wuxiang. As soon as Zhuowen finished speaking, he completely disappeared into the black hole. He Wuxiang gloomily stared at Zhuowen, who disappeared into the black hole, and hesitated for a moment before following Zhuowen into the depths of the black hole. Unfortunately, the moment he Wuxiang arrived before the black hole immediately shrank. It shrank extremely quickly and disappeared without a trace. Damn it! He Wuxiang was flustered and exasperated. He threw a punch at the spot where the black hole disappeared, but he realized that it was useless. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the world of the sea was in complete chaos. Endless whirlpools swept out from the depths of the sea. He Wuxiang looked at the countless whirlpools around him with an ugly expression. He could only do his best to use all his means to resist the terrifying power of the whirlpools that swept out from the depths of the sea. This was a small pool. Around the small pool, there were bony rock walls, and in front of the small pool, there was a deep passage. The passage was extremely dark, as if it had no end. Zhuowen's gaze landed on the center of the small pool. There was a rock about the size of a square inch, and there was a small water droplet on the rock. The water droplet's surface was flowing with a 7-colored light, making it look gorgeous. It seems that I have been in the small drop of water all this time. The small drop of water contains an extremely mysterious ancient restriction. It is because of the existence of the ancient restriction that the small drop of water contains an enormous world of the sea. Zhuowen said with a look of understanding. That he Wuxiang is a scourge. We can't let him come out unscathed, Xiaohei suddenly said. Zhuowen grinned and said, I naturally know that. When I came out of the small drop of water, I already did something to it. It won't be long before the world of the sea and the small drop of water completely collapses. As he spoke, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the small pool. Through the topographic map that Songjie had given him, he roughly knew that this place belonged to the category of an underground maze. On the rock in the center of the small pool, there is a small drop of water full of powerful ancient restriction power. This is really strange. Could there be something at the bottom of the pool? Zhuowen murmured. He looked at the small drop of water on the rock and said, There is still some time before the small drop of water collapses. I still have time to go to the bottom of the pool to investigate. Moreover, even if the small drop of water collapsed, He Wuxiang would definitely be seriously injured. Although He Wuxiang had the King Blade Saint Talisman, and his cultivation had reached the peak of the Sky Immortal Realm, it was not easy to kill He Wuxiang. However, it wouldn't be that easy for He Wuxiang to kill Zhuowen. After all, Zhuowen was no longer the same as before. After receiving Songjie's enlightenment, his cultivation base had advanced to the early Heaven Immortal Realm. Moreover, his saint physique had reached the Great Circle. With the combination of the saint body and cultivation, the battle prowess that Zhuowen could display was not necessarily a match for the intermediate stage of the Sky Immortal Realm. Although He Wuxiang was strong, it would not be easy for him to kill the current Zhuowen. Moreover, He Wuxiang had already suffered serious injuries when the mysterious space collapsed. If the world of the small drop of water collapsed, it would be impossible for He Wuxiang to come out unscathed. At that time, it would be hard to tell who would be the hunter and who would be the prey. Thinking of this, Zhuowen suddenly jumped into the pool. The temperature of the pool was far lower than he had imagined. Even he could not help but shiver. The deeper he went, the colder the surrounding air became. Even Zhuowen's breath turned into a small ice dragon due to the cold environment. After diving for about a kilometer, many ice cubes appeared around the pool. These ice cubes were very strange. They were not floating on the surface of the pool, but floating around a kilometer deep in the pool. Furthermore, Zhuowen also discovered that there was a lifelike corpse sealed in each of the ice cubes. There were both beasts and humans, but most of them were humans. There were old and young, male and female. Some of the corpses were even incomplete. They were badly mutilated, and it was impossible to see what they looked like when they were alive. These ice cubes were not enough to shock Zhuowen. What really shocked him was that at the bottom of the pool, there was a huge gap. An extremely terrifying and powerful aura emerged from this gap. Even from afar, Zhuowen could feel a sense of horror from this aura. This aura was too powerful, to the point that under the effect of this aura, an extremely terrifying vortex swept up in the crack. Zhuowen's consciousness penetrated the terrifying whirlpool and went deep into it. He found that there was a head in the whirlpool. What shocked him was not just the head, but the head's owner. It was the head of one of the 3 demigods of the Sky Armor continent, Zhan Bai. Back then, Zhuowen had seen the truth of what had happened 10,000 years ago in the black ball given by the master of the tomb god. Naturally, he had also seen the appearance of the 3 demigods. Zhan Bai's appearance was not unfamiliar to him. Zhan Bai's head is actually here? What about Qiao Yu's? Zhuowen muttered to himself. Back then, Zhan Bai and Qiao Yu had sacrificed themselves to stop the white-haired man. Chapter 1842. Mysterious Scabbard. Let's go in and take a look. After thinking for a while, Zhuowen finally decided to go down to investigate. Thinking of this, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and suddenly rushed down. He was extremely fast like a bolt of black lightning. The moment he approached the terrifying whirlpool, he immediately took out the Fushi cauldron. The Fushi cauldron had the ability to absorb pressure. This terrifying whirlpool was formed by the pressure emitted by the demigod's head, so it was naturally the best choice to use the Fushi cauldron to protect himself. Slowly going into the depths of the whirlpool, Zhuowen entered the deepest part of the whirlpool without any danger. Then he arrived in front of Zhan Bai's head. Zhan Bai's head was extremely large, dozens of feet in size. It was sealed in ice, and there was a look of facing death on his face. It was the expression that had frozen at the last moment when he had chosen to self-destruct. Zhuowen quietly stared at Zhan Bai's head, especially when he saw the expression of facing death on Zhan Bai's face before he died. He was deeply shocked. It was extremely difficult to cultivate to become a demigod. At such a cultivation level, Zhan Bai was willing to sacrifice himself without any complaints or regrets. Zhuowen sincerely admired him. Zhan Bai is the hero who protected the heavenly armor continent back then. Now that I've discovered his head here, I naturally can't ignore it. Zhuowen sighed softly and waved his sleeve. Immediately, flames swept out like a fire dragon and surrounded Zhan Bai's head. Not long after, the ice around Zhan Bai's head was completely melted by the flames, revealing Zhan Bai's true appearance. At this moment, Zhuowen discovered that there was an extremely deep hole in between Zhan Bai's eyebrows. This hole was extremely dark, like an abyss. Zhuowen stared at the hole in between Zhan Bai's eyebrows in surprise. As Zhan Bai's head was dozens of feet in size, and the hole in between Zhan Bai's eyebrows was also about 10 feet in size, it was just enough to allow Zhuowen to enter. Seeing this hole, Zhuowen immediately became curious. His eyes flickered, and in the end, he decided to enter the hole to take a look. He knew very well that Zhan Bai was a demigod after all. Although he had chosen to sacrifice himself to protect the heavenly armor planet, it was unlikely that he would not leave his inheritance behind. If he could obtain Zhan Bai's inheritance, it would be extremely beneficial to him. When he thought up to this point, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and brought the Fushi cauldron with him as he entered the hole between Zhan Bai's eyebrows like a ray of light. After entering, Zhuowen pointed with his right finger, and a flame flashed out, illuminating the surroundings. He discovered that the surrounding passageways were filled with blood-red veins. After walking in the tunnel for about 2 hours, Zhuowen arrived at the end of the tunnel. He discovered that there were countless strands of blood in front of him. It looked extremely strange, and in the middle of these strands of blood, there was a sword sheath lying quietly. The sword sheath looked ordinary, and there were several bloodstains on the surface of the sword sheath, indicating that the sword sheath had been through some kind of fierce battle. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the sword sheath, and he slowly squinted. Although the sword sheath looked ordinary, Zhuowen would not foolishly treat it as an ordinary item. How could something that the demigod Zhanbai had placed in between his eyebrows be ordinary? However, for some reason, Zhuowen felt an extremely strong sense of danger around the sword sheath. This sense of danger did not come out of nowhere. He had felt it the moment he entered the hole between Zhanbai's eyebrows. This sense of danger faintly told him that if he took the sword sheath out, perhaps something ominous would happen. After hesitating for a moment, Zhuowen finally decided to take the sword sheath out. He knew very well that if he did not take it out this time, he would not have another chance in the future. After all, if the sword sheath was really a demigod item, it would become a treasure that countless experts in the outside world would go crazy over. If he missed this opportunity, it would be too late for regrets. Take it. Zhuowen made up his mind. He then pointed with his right hand, and countless yellow spring water droplets flew out, forming a huge gate of reincarnation in front of him. At the same time, he summoned the Fuxi cauldron by his side in case of any accidents. After doing all that, Zhuowen extended his right hand and grabbed the scabbard. Then with a tug he pulled it out. Rumble. The moment Zhuowen grabbed the sword sheath, an extremely violent tremor suddenly transmitted through Zhanbai's head. It was as if the earth was shaking, and it was exceptionally terrifying and violent. Then, Zhuowen smelled an extremely unpleasant stench in the passage. He was very familiar with this stench. It was the smell of decay. Without thinking, Zhuowen grabbed the sword sheath and immediately retreated out of the passage. Soon he rushed out of the passage. Then he was shocked to find that Zhanbai's head was rapidly decaying. Moreover, Zhuowen also found that the moment Zhanbai's head decayed, the head suddenly exploded, and countless red mist burst out. The red mist was densely packed and spread out in all directions. However, this spread only lasted for 2 breaths of time. Then an extremely terrifying suction force came from the center of the red mist, and absorbed all the red mist. After the red mist was completely absorbed, Zhuowen saw a huge exotic beast that was dozens of feet long. The moment he saw this exotic beast, Zhuowen's pupils shrank into needles because he found that the appearance of this exotic beast was exactly the same as the phantom beast head between Kong 1 and the black and white giant's eyebrows. Even the outline was the same. However, Kong 1 and the black and white giant only had a mark between their eyebrows, while the exotic beast in front of him was real. Oh! The exotic beast opened its scarlet eyes and stared coldly at Zhuowen. Then it roared at the sky, and a terrifying sound wave spread out in all directions. Crack! The instant the sound wave spread out, Zhuowen was shocked to find that countless cracks had appeared on the surface of the countless ice blocks floating above, and the corpses in the ice blocks were awakened. They opened their eyes and stared coldly at Zhuowen. Feeling the focus of so many gazes, Zhuowen only felt his scalp go numb. Then, the corpses broke out of the ice blocks and rushed towards Zhuowen. Their ferocious roars filled the surroundings. Swoosh! At the same time, the exotic beast roared again. It stomped its right foot and suddenly rushed towards Zhuowen at an extremely fast speed. Go! Zhuowen tapped with his right finger, causing the door of reincarnation to shoot out explosively like a shuttle, and it fiercely obstructed the beast's path. On the other hand, Zhuowen swiftly flashed towards the top of the pool with the Fuxi cauldron. Boom! The gate of reincarnation was powerful, and blocked the exotic beast for a moment. However, the exotic beast's strength was extraordinary, and the gate of reincarnation could only block it for a moment, before it was completely shattered. Swoosh! Swoosh! At the instant Zhuowen fled towards the top of the pool, the corpses that flashed out of the ice blocks flashed towards Zhuowen. Fortunately, the movements of these corpses were extremely stiff, and their strengths weren't strong. They were only around the earthly immortal realm, so they didn't pose much of a threat to Zhuowen. On the other hand, the main threat to Zhuowen was the exotic beast that was flashing towards him from behind. This exotic beast was extremely formidable, and even an ordinary peak heavenly immortal realm expert might not be a match for this exotic beast. If he was entangled by it, then it would be extremely troublesome for Zhuowen. When he thought up to here, Zhuowen immediately utilized the energy of Dao Insight, causing countless ripples to suffuse the soles of his feet. After that, The surrounding water transformed into two vortexes that converged at the soles of Zhuowen's feet, causing Zhuowen to seem like a raging dragon that flashed explosively towards the top of the pool. Swoosh! Swoosh! Zhuowen's speed was extremely fast, and the speed of those corpses couldn't be compared to that of Zhuowen at all. Therefore, Zhuowen's agile movements allowed him to avoid all of the corpses, and he quickly swam towards the top of the pool. There were a few corpses that happened to be blocking his path. In order not to waste any time, Zhuowen directly punched out with his perfect divine body, and those corpses were directly smashed into powder by his punch. Howl! The roar of the exotic beast got closer. Wherever the exotic beast passed, all of the corpses retreated, and it was basically unimpeded. At the same time, clouds of blood mist suddenly burst out from the exotic beast's body, and in the blood mist, streaks of blood quickly flashed toward Zhuowen. At this moment, Zhuowen's speed was enhanced by Dao Insight, so he smoothly blasted all the corpses that blocked his path into powder. When those streaks of blood rushed over and approached Zhuowen, Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly, and he immediately used the immortal technique Lone Peak. Surging celestial core power condensed from his fingertips and turned into an incomparably huge and proud mountain peak. The Lone Peak descended from the sky, stirring up an endless water storm in the pool, blocking the incoming bloodlines. Zhuowen, on the other hand, continued to flee upwards without stopping. Boom! The Lone Peak didn't last for long, and under the attack of the streaks of blood, it exploded into countless pieces. The exotic beast roared even more angrily. Its red eyes stared at Zhuowen, and it couldn't wait to swallow Zhuowen whole. On the rock in the center of the small pool, a small water droplet suddenly trembled, and then suddenly burst open. A vast amount of energy spread out, causing the rock walls around the small pool to shake violently. A rather embarrassed figure swept out from the countless splashes of water. Spurt! He Wuxiang spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale and bloodless. As soon as he emerged, he roared towards the sky. Zhuowen, you and I are irreconcilable. Don't let me see you again, or I'll kill you every time I see you. No one will be able to protect you this time. He Wuxiang was simply flustered and exasperated this time. With his experience, he naturally knew that there was a powerful ancient seal in the ocean. However, he didn't know that Zhuowen had actually grasped the ancient seal and used it to deal with him. It truly infuriated him. Moreover, due to the collapse of the oceanic world, the powerful energy that it produced caused He Wuxiang's injuries to worsen. His cultivation fell from the peak of the heavenly immortal realm to the late stage of the heavenly immortal realm. The fall of his cultivation infuriated He Wuxiang even more. He had almost lost his mind. If he encountered Zhuowen again, he would definitely kill Zhuowen regardless of the consequences. After all, it was extremely difficult to cultivate again after the fall of one's cultivation. Moreover, the price to pay was extremely great. Splash! Suddenly, a figure scuttled out of the small pool, and countless splashes of water splashed out. Chapter 1843. Secret Plot. Zhuowen stomped his right foot and immediately shot out of the water, causing countless splashes. After that, he felt an extremely dense gaze filled with killing intent. He slowly turned his head and focused his gaze on He Wuxiang, who wasn't too far away. His pupils constricted. Haha. You really didn't need any effort. Zhuowen, you're dead meat today. He Wuxiang laughed nastily. He stomped his right foot and shot explosively towards Zhuowen. At the same time, he waved his right sleeve and countless strands of celestial core power condensed into a long saber that was several meters long. He suddenly slashed with the saber. Zhuowen silently stared at He Wuxiang as his divine sense penetrated deep into the exotic beast at the bottom of the pool. The instant the exotic beast was about to break out of the water, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a resolute expression. Then he tilted his body and dove headfirst into the pool just as the exotic beast broke out of the water. Splash! The sound of water breaking and entering rang out at the same time. The exotic beast hadn't expected Zhuowen to dive back into the pool. Similarly, He Wuxiang hadn't expected Zhuowen to do so either. And it was precisely this coincidence that caused He Wuxiang and the exotic beast to collide fiercely. He Wuxiang's saber suddenly swung over, and landed heavily on the exotic beast's head. Bang! He Wuxiang felt his right hand go numb. Then, the long saber in his hand had unknowingly shattered into countless pieces. Taking a few steps back, He Wuxiang stared at the exotic beast in front of him in astonishment. He hadn't expected the exotic beast's body to be so tough. The exotic beast was actually unharmed by the saber. Oh! The exotic beast roared at the sky. He Wuxiang's saber hadn't been light. Moreover, it had landed directly on its head. Even though the exotic beast's body was indeed strong, it didn't mean that it didn't feel any pain at all. The exotic beast suddenly turned its head. Its eyes were filled with rage. After so many years, this was the first time it had been hit so painfully by someone. It had almost lost its mind. As for Zhuowen's whereabouts, it didn't care at all. The only thing it wanted now was to completely tear apart the human cultivator in front of it. Whoosh! The exotic beast roared and charged toward He Wuxiang like a bolt of lightning. He Wuxiang's face was unsightly. He instantly understood what had happened. He knew that he had been tricked by Zhuowen. Zhuowen, you little bastard! He Wuxiang was flustered and exasperated. Seeing the strange beast pouncing towards him, he could only helplessly form a seal with both hands. Countless saber lights and sword shadows emanated from his body. Immortal technique, saber light and sword shadow. Saber and sword shadows filled the surroundings, forming an extremely powerful trap, trapping the exotic beast within. Oh! Unfortunately, the exotic beast was no ordinary creature. It opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of green liquid. This mouthful of green liquid was really strange. It contained a strong corrosive power. The moment the green liquid was spat out, the surrounding saber lights and sword shadows were directly corroded by the green liquid and collapsed inch by inch. He Wuxiang's eyes were gloomy. He stomped his right foot and leaped up. Then he formed a seal with both hands and immediately used the King Blade Saint Talisman. The exotic beast gave him a strong sense of danger. He knew that if he didn't use the King Blade Saint Talisman, he wouldn't be the exotic beast's match. In the pool, Zhuowen silently watched the ongoing battle between He Wuxiang and the exotic beast. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he was waiting. He was very clear that the exotic beast's strength was absolutely extraordinary, and it would definitely force He Wuxiang to use his powerful trump card. At that time, when the battle between the two of them reached its climax, it would be the best time for Zhuowen to attack. He Wuxiang had targeted Zhuowen many times. If he let him go this time, he would definitely be plotted against again. Moreover, the King Blade Saint Talisman on He Wuxiang's body had unimaginable benefits for the origin source Saint Talisman in Zhuowen's body. As for the other corpses in the pool, they were suppressed by Zhuowen's Fushi Cauldron. The powerful aura released by the Fushi Cauldron wasn't something these corpses could withstand. Immortal Art Blade Void Slash. He Wuxiang bit the tip of his tongue and spat on the surface of the King Blade Saint Talisman. Then he pointed with his right hand and terrifying blade shadows emerged from the Saint Talisman. Then He Wuxiang pointed with his right hand again. The blade shadows condensed at his fingertip and turned into a thumb-sized black dot. Slash. He Wuxiang's fingertip carried the black dot. Then he drew a line in front of him. Instantly, as his finger slid, countless black rays gathered at his fingertip and formed a huge blade shadow. The blade shadow was extremely extraordinary. It was shaped like a crescent moon, but no one could see where the end of the blade shadow was. It was as if the blade shadow had no end. Whoosh! The moment the saber shadow swept out, the rock walls around the small pool were immediately flattened. It was as if the surrounding rock walls had been directly cut by the saber shadow. Countless rocks fell from above, and the space also trembled violently. The strange beast's eyes narrowed. Its scarlet eyes revealed a rare dignified expression. It could feel that the blade shadow was extraordinary. However, it didn't retreat. Instead, it roared and pushed its right foot into the air. Instead of retreating, it advanced. Furthermore, as the exotic beast charged out, countless bloody mists gushed out from its body. As the bloody mists gushed out, blood-colored meridians shot out one after another, condensing into a huge blood-colored mouth around its body. In the depths of the blood-colored mouth, there was a blood-colored vortex. The vortex spun rapidly. It contained a powerful suction force that seemed to be able to swallow everything. Rumble. The blade shadow and the blood-colored mouth collided. Then there was a cracking sound. Countless cracks appeared on the rock walls around the pool. At the same time, the moment the cracks appeared on the rock walls, the surrounding space also distorted. The shattered rock walls all disappeared in the distorted space, turning the surroundings into a terrifying vacuum. Under the impact of the collision, countless splashes of water shot up into the sky, forming terrifying water pillars. These water pillars shot up into the sky, and then fell down one after another. There were countless sounds of water splashing. Zhuowen, who was in the pool, narrowed his eyes. His celestial core power spread out around him to resist the terrifying water vortex around him. His eyes were fixed on the sky. Splash. Suddenly, a huge figure flew out from the sky and landed in the pool. Another figure flew towards the exit in front of the pool. Zhuowen didn't even look at the figure that fell into the pool, because it wasn't He Wuxiang. It was the strange beast. At this moment, the strange beast was in an extremely sorry state. Its scales were rolled up and covered in blood. Its aura was weak. Dang. Zhuowen jumped out of the water and rushed towards He Wuxiang, who was flying towards the exit in front of him. Killing finger of the underworld. Celestial technique lone peak. Celestial technique asking Buddha. Before he got close to He Wuxiang, Zhuowen used the 3 celestial techniques in a spurt of energy. The moment the celestial techniques were used, invisible ripples of Tao will spread out and envelop the 3 celestial techniques. Little bastard. He Wuxiang was in an extremely sorry state. His face was pale and blood was seeping out of the corner of his mouth. The accumulated injuries in his body had become even more serious after the fight with the strange beast. Due to the previous injuries, his cultivation had fallen to the advanced stage of the Earth Immortal realm. Now, after the fight with the strange beast, his cultivation immediately became unstable again, and could fall to the intermediate stage of the Earth Immortal realm at any time. This was undoubtedly the moment when He Wuxiang was at his weakest. Zhuowen took advantage of this opportunity to strike. Even though He Wuxiang was depressed and angry, it was still useless. Old man, you've been picking on me. If I don't pay you back, you'll look down on me. Zhuowen's eyes were cold as the 3 celestial techniques landed on He Wuxiang. At the same time, Zhuowen used the devouring curse seal. Countless curse seal chains swept out and sealed He Wuxiang in all directions, making it difficult for him to escape. Seeing Zhuowen's move, He Wuxiang cursed inwardly, but there was nothing he could do. He could only forcefully gather his celestial core power and spit it out. Then countless weapon shadows turned into an oval-shaped vortex that surrounded his body. The King Blade Saint Talisman floated in front of him. However, the King Blade Saint Talisman's brilliance was obviously a little dim. It was obvious that the King Blade Saint Talisman had suffered heavy damage in the previous battle. Bang, bang, bang. The 3 celestial techniques and the power of Tao will finally landed on He Wuxiang's defense. Then, He Wuxiang's pupils constricted and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The countless weapon shadows in front of him shattered. Sky Immortal? When did you become a Sky Immortal? This is impossible. He Wuxiang's pupils constricted. Although he had some guesses when the Sky Immortal Thunder Tribulation appeared, the Sky Immortal Thunder Tribulation disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Therefore, he didn't pay much attention to it. He also didn't expect Zhuowen to become a Sky Immortal. After all, when Zhuowen entered this place, he was only a late-stage Earth Immortal. There was a big gap between him and a Sky Immortal. It was impossible for him to become a Sky Immortal in such a short time. But now, the power of the 3 celestial techniques that Zhuowen used was far beyond his expectations. This was definitely not a power that an Earth Immortal could use. This was because Zhuowen's 3 celestial techniques were far more powerful than before. They had reached the level of a Sky Immortal. In addition to the power of Tao Will, Zhuowen's 3 celestial techniques were used at the same time. Even a late-stage Earth Immortal expert wouldn't dare to take it head-on. If He Wuxiang was at his peak, he wouldn't be afraid of Zhuowen's attack. However, his injuries were too severe. His cultivation had fallen to the late-stage Earth Immortal realm. Moreover, he had fought with the exotic beast. His injuries were so severe that he was like an arrow at the end of its flight. As for Zhuo Wen's 3 immortal techniques, it was absolutely a calamity for him. He Wushang spat out a mouthful of blood and fell like a meteor. He smashed into the ground and formed a huge pit. The King Blade Saint Talisman revolved around He Wushang. However, the brilliance on its surface was getting dimmer. It wasn't much different from an ordinary talisman. You're dead. Chapter 1844. Crazy Move. Inside the hole, He Wushang's face was pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood. When he saw the figure falling from above, his expression changed drastically. Heaven and earth reversal. He Wushang ignored the serious injuries on his body and pinched the sword finger on his right hand, pointing at the slightly dimmed King Blade Saint Talisman. Swoosh. When He Wushang's right finger touched the King Blade Saint Talisman, the King Blade Saint Talisman exploded with blazing illusory light. The illusory light contained endless illusory shadows of all kinds of weapons. There were too many illusory weapons, and their speed was too fast. In the blink of an eye, they filled the space where the small pool was. Then Zhuowen discovered that the surrounding scenery was spinning as if the entire world had been turned upside down. He was clearly approaching He Wushang, but strangely, he discovered that the closer he got, the further away he was from He Wushang. What's going on? Zhuowen's pupils shrank. What was happening to him was too strange. He was clearly moving forward, but the current situation showed that he was constantly retreating. He Wushang clutched his chest as he coldly stared at Zhuowen. His eyes flickered, but in the end he decided to leave this place first. His injuries were too severe. If he continued to fight, his cultivation might really fall to the mid-stage Sky Immortal realm. At that time, it would be too late for regrets. Count yourself lucky. The next time I meet you, I'll make you suffer a fate worse than death. He Wushang coldly snorted. With a wave of his right hand, the King Blade Saint Talisman appeared in his hand. With a stomp of his right foot, he planned to leave this space. Unfortunately, when He Wushang reached the entrance of the passageway, the sound of something tearing through the air could be heard. It was heading straight for He Wushang's face. He Wushang's pupils shrank as he stared at the incoming fist. The timing of the fist was too tricky. It happened to be when He Wushang was the most relaxed after leaving the passageway. Therefore, He Wushang didn't have time to defend himself. He could only block in front of his face with his right hand. Celestial yuan erupted from his right arm, forming a blazing white light. Kacha. When the punch landed on He Wushang's right arm, He Wushang felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his hand. Then his right arm was twisted and fractured. He spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated. He stared gloomily at the figure in front of him. The young man in front of him was dressed in a tight-fitting outfit. His posture was vigorous, and his face was expressionless. His facial features were well-defined, and his sturdy body was filled with a rich dark gold color. Zhuowen. He Wushang held onto his fractured right hand and took a few steps back. Then he looked at the figure trapped in the reversal of heaven and earth, and realized that the figure trapped in the reversal of heaven and earth was also Zhuowen. His face instantly darkened. He didn't expect Zhuowen to have such a trick up his sleeve. It was Zhuowen's perfect sacred body that had appeared at the entrance of the passageway. With the great power and physique of a perfect sacred body, it was comparable to a mid-stage heaven immortal expert. It could even fight a late-stage earth immortal expert. Due to He Wushang's serious injuries, his realm of late-stage heaven immortal was already unstable. Coupled with the surprise attack of the perfect sacred body, it wasn't strange for He Wushang to be pushed back. Zhuowen had secretly placed the perfect sacred body at the entrance of the passageway. If He Wushang tried to escape, the perfect sacred body could appear and stop him from escaping. Zhuowen, who was inside the reversal of heaven and earth, touched his glabella with his right hand and immediately took out the Fushi cauldron. At this moment he didn't hold back at all. He released all the pressure in the Fushi cauldron. Rumble. The boundless pressure turned into an existence akin to a raging dragon that swept out in all directions. Under the impact of the pressure dragon, the power that could reverse the universe crumbled and collapsed. Zhuowen's real body walked over step by step. He held the Fushi cauldron in his right hand and smashed it toward He Wushang. The The terrifying pressure was like a terrifying hurricane that swept out in all directions. It looked exceptionally terrifying. At the same time, the perfect Saint Physique's right foot stepped into the void. Like a shuttle, it suddenly rushed over and appeared in front of He Wuxiang in an instant. With a punch, the surrounding space exploded, forming a chain-like pressure that heavily trapped He Wuxiang within. He Wuxiang's eyes were gloomy. He could only use the King Blade Saint talisman to block in front of him. At the same time, he flicked his finger and took out a long black stick-like weapon from his spirit ring. This stick-like weapon was very strange. It was surrounded by all kinds of weapon phantoms. There were sabers, spears, and swords everywhere. Heavenly Saint Weapon, 100 weapons. Zhuowen stared at the strange weapon in He Wuxiang's hand, and suddenly became cautious. After all, the 100 weapons were Heavenly Saint weapons. They were extraordinary. Zhuowen didn't dare to underestimate them. He Wuxiang grabbed with his right hand and slapped the King Blade Saint talisman on the 100 weapons. Suddenly, the countless weapon phantoms on the surface of the 100 weapons began to boil. It was like a strange gray storm that constantly swept out and exploded. Whoosh! He Wuxiang grabbed the 100 weapons with his right hand and suddenly spun it. Then the 100 weapons were ruthlessly thrown out. The storm formed by the countless weapon phantoms was filled with violent intent. Bang! 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 When the weapon phantoms hit the pressure released by the Fushi cauldron, there was a terrifying cracking sound. Then, the surrounding space began to tremble. Rumble! At the same time, the perfect sacred body's attack came like a dragon and heavily smashed in front of He Wuxiang. He Wuxiang's pupil shrank. He let out a low roar and suddenly pointed at the surface of the 100 weapons. An even more terrifying weapon phantom surged out and rushed toward the perfect sacred body, wanting to completely crush him. Dang! 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 The weapon phantoms were indeed powerful. The perfect sacred body only felt his fists go numb when he punched it. He couldn't help but retreat. At the same time, the pressure emanated by the Fushi cauldron actually started to show signs of collapse. Zhuo Wen's eyes narrowed as he flicked his sleeve and put the Fushi cauldron away. On the other hand, the pressure was completely shattered by the storm of weapons. Whoosh! Zhuo Wen's body kicked out. Dowel spread under his feet. Like an illusory ghost, he constantly flashed and dodged the attacks of the weapon phantoms around him. Combine! Zhuo Wen let out a low roar. The perfect sacred body not far away suddenly stepped forward and directly entered Zhuo Wen's body. Zhuo Wen's aura suddenly skyrocketed. Zhuo Wen's movements were like moving clouds and flowing water. With the support of Tao Will, his speed was almost comparable to the peak of the Heaven Immortal Realm. He constantly shuttled between the weapon phantoms and instantly swept in front of He Wuxiang. 9 turn golden crack runes. Zhuo Wen immediately released 9 golden runes. These 9 golden runes overlapped around his right arm and kept rotating, emitting a brilliant golden light. Then he clenched his right fist and directly punched out. The 9 golden runes kept overlapping, forming a huge golden rune. It was like a huge golden mountain that crushed down. He Wuxiang's pupils shrank. He stared at the golden mountain that was getting closer and closer. He let out an angry roar. He held the 100 weapons in his right hand and suddenly stabbed it toward the sky. The 100 weapons spun fiercely and formed an extremely sharp black spike at the tip. Bang! The golden mountain and the 100 weapons collided. An invisible force spread out from the soles of their feet. Then, countless cracks spread out from the ground under their feet. They exploded into countless pieces of gravel and powder. Zhuo Wen squinted his eyes. He pointed at the surface of the golden mountain with his right hand. The power of Tao will spread out and envelop the golden mountain, causing the golden mountain's power to reach its peak. He Wuxiang spat out a mouthful of blood. His face grew paler and paler as he retreated repeatedly. He'd already suffered heavy injuries. Now that he'd been struck by such a powerful attack from Zhuo Wen, it was simply like adding injuries on top of injuries. His cultivation dropped from the advanced stage of the Heavenly Immortal Realm to the intermediate stage of the Heavenly Immortal Realm. Blood flowed from the corner of Zhuo Wen's mouth as he involuntarily retreated several dozen steps. Countless cracks appeared on the golden mountain as he retreated. Zhuo Wen, you little bastard! I'll make you pay a heavy price. Even if my cultivation drops to the initial stage of the earthly immortal realm, I'll still kill you. He Wuxiang was extremely depressed when he noticed that his cultivation had dropped to the intermediate stage of the earthly immortal realm. He roared towards the sky, causing his hair to flutter while his eyes were completely crimson red. He Wuxiang bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood essence onto the 100 weapons. After that, he suddenly slapped the end of the 100 weapons with his right hand. Swoosh! The 100 weapons suddenly shot out explosively, like an invisible shuttle. Everywhere they passed, space warped and formed a strange vacuum. Zhuowen stared at the 100 weapons that shot over explosively, and his expression was extremely unsightly. He immediately withdrew his earthly immortal saint artifacts, the immortal culling sword and 5 animal seal. He'd placed these 2 earthly immortal saint artifacts in the Fushi cauldron for over 20 breaths of time. Now the aura of these 2 saint artifacts had far surpassed ordinary earthly immortal saint artifacts. Green energy sprayed out from the 5 animal seal and formed into the form of a tiger, a deer, a bear, an ape, and a bird. On the other hand, the immortal culling sword tore through space and drew numerous formidable sword images in the sky. Bang! 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 Unfortunately, the 100 weapons were truly too terrifying and unstoppable at this moment. At the instant the 100 weapons came into contact with the immortal culling sword and 5 animal seal, a vast force swept out explosively, and then the immortal culling sword and 5 animal seal collapsed. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed and his heart ached. It was truly a pity that 2 earthly immortal saint artifacts had been destroyed just like that. However, now was not the time for him to feel heartache. He bent his right finger and used all 3 celestial techniques in one breath. Under the boost of the energy of Tao insights, the might of these 3 immortal arts was extremely formidable. Unfortunately, it was still insufficient before the 100 soldiers at this moment, and the 3 immortal arts merely obstructed the 100 soldiers for a short moment before being directly blasted into powder. Break. In the end, the 100 weapons arrived in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen suddenly punched out and unleashed his perfect saint body to the extreme. His fist smashed into the 100 weapons. Uft. Unfortunately, the 100 weapons were too terrifying. Zhuowen's fist seemed to have smashed into an incomparably huge mountain. Then his fist was directly distorted, and he spat out a mouthful of blood as he flew backward. Zhuowen, you're dead meat. He Wuxiang's eyes were filled with madness as he stared fixedly at Zhuowen, who was flying backward in the sky. Chapter 1845. King Blade Saint Talisman. Zhuowen was hesitant when he took out the scabbard. After all, he'd just obtained this strange scabbard, and he didn't know how to use it. He didn't know if the scabbard could block the 100 soldiers. But he had no other choice. Besides the mysterious eyeball, he only had the strange scabbard. The mysterious eyeball was too mysterious, and Zhuowen didn't want to use it often. Moreover, the mysterious eyeball was playing dead. He'd called out to it before, but it still showed no signs of waking up. At the instant he withdrew the sword sheath, Zhuowen revealed a resolute expression as he suddenly tossed the sword sheath towards the soldiers that were flashing over, whereas his right foot was enhanced by Tao insight, and he was prepared to flee at any moment. Clang! The 100 soldiers instantly flew over and collided with the surface of the scabbard. A clear sound of collision resounded. Whoosh! Then Zhuowen noticed that the ordinary scabbard seemed to have been stimulated by something. The entire scabbard was trembling incessantly, and the bloodstains on the scabbard's surface surged with a blazing bloody glow. The instant the bloody glow erupted, the weight of the scabbard instantly increased by countless times. The 100 soldiers that were originally on the surface of the scabbard trembled, and were directly sent flying by the scabbard. Zhuowen's eyes flickered when the scabbard was sent flying. He stomped his right foot on the ground, and threw the scabbard once more. This time, he threw the scabbard directly at He Wuxiang below. At this moment, He Wuxiang was shocked. He didn't hesitate to drop his cultivation as the price to forcefully raise the 100 soldiers, but they were actually so easily blasted away by the inconspicuous scabbard. This was truly inconceivable. He Wuxiang howled when he saw the scabbard flying over once more. He summoned the 100 soldiers back with one hand, and then he flicked his right hand towards the scabbard that was flying over. Bang! He Wuxiang's pupils constricted to the size of needles when the scabbard came into contact with the scabbard. An enormous force spread from the 100 soldiers to Zhuowen's right hand, and then the 100 soldiers flew out of his hand. He Wuxiang's right hand exploded with clouds of blood, and he grunted as he retreated repeatedly. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He stomped his right foot on the ground, and arrived before the 100 soldiers that had flown out of his hand, and grabbed them. At the same time, the scabbard continued to fly towards He Wuxiang like a hot knife through butter. At this moment, He Wuxiang's face was completely pale. The scabbard was truly too strange. Even Wuxiang's Wuxiang was. Even his 100 soldiers had been blasted away, and his right hand, was indirectly crippled. He Wuxiang his right hand studio. Let's go. He Wuxiang reluctantly looked at the soldiers that Zhuowen had taken away. He bit the tip of his tongue without hesitation and spat out a mouthful of blood. This mouthful of blood immediately exploded into countless blood threads that wrapped around He Wuxiang. He Wuxiang, who was wrapped in countless strands of blood, disappeared like a bolt of lightning. He was so fast that he was almost as fast as a true immortal. The scabbard hit the ground, and the entire pool shook a few times. Then the scabbard smashed a huge hole in the ground. Zhuowen flew to the edge of the hole in the scabbard. He looked silently at He Wuxiang, who had disappeared, with a thoughtful expression. He Wuxiang is indeed an expert at the peak of the sky immortal realm. Even though his cultivation has dropped so much, he is still so hard to kill. Zhuowen sighed. Zhuowen had used all his skills in the battle just now, but he was still unable to kill He Wuxiang, who was already injured. It could be seen that He Wuxiang was indeed hard to kill. However, Zhuowen also knew that He Wuxiang had paid a heavy price. After all, He Wuxiang did not hesitate to drop his cultivation again in order to forcefully increase the power of the 100 soldiers. He Wuxiang, whose cultivation had dropped to the early stage of the sky immortal realm, was no longer a threat to Zhuowen. If Zhuowen met He Wuxiang again in the underground maze, he would be able to kill him. Roar! The moment He Wuxiang left this place, the strange beast in the small pool suddenly leapt up and swept towards Zhuowen's back. I've been paying attention to you for a long time. Zhuowen sneered. He grabbed the mysterious eyeball, which was pretending to be dead, and threw it at the strange beast behind him. The mysterious eyeball was extremely restrained by the strange beast's head between Kong Wen's eyebrows. Now that the real strange beast had appeared, it would probably be subdued as well. Hiss. After being thrown out, the mysterious eyeball hissed at Zhuowen in dissatisfaction. However, it soon noticed the strange beast in front of it, and its eyes revealed an extremely human-like joy. Whoosh! The mysterious eyeball blinked, and a black bolt of lightning shot out at an extremely fast speed. Roar! After the strange beast saw the mysterious eyeball clearly, its eyes revealed a look of fear. It immediately turned around and tried to escape into the pool. Unfortunately, the black bolt of lightning was too fast, and the strange beast's change of direction took too much time. Hence, the strange beast didn't even have time to react before the black bolt of lightning enveloped it. A sorrowful cry rang out, and Zhuowen was shocked to discover that the strange beast had exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood under the black bolt of lightning. Furthermore, the flesh and blood were all absorbed into nothingness by the black bolt of lightning. After the black bolt of lightning returned to the mysterious eyeball, it revealed a satisfied look and returned to Zhuowen's collar. What is the origin of this mysterious eyeball? Why is it so effective against this strange beast? Zhuowen looked at the mysterious eyeball lying in his collar quietly. He increasingly felt that this mysterious eyeball was inextricably linked to the depths of Heavenly Armor Planet. Zhuowen also felt that the strange beast that had appeared from Zhanbai's head had something to do with the depths of Heavenly Armor Planet. This strange beast came out from Zhanbai's head. It seems like this strange beast has been in Zhanbai's head for a very long time, like a parasite, Xiao He said gravely in his mind. A parasite? Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He seemed to have found some clues. Whether it was Kong Wen, the black and white giant, or the many figures in the space where the black and white giant was, they all had the mark of a strange beast between their eyebrows. Zhuowen had a bold guess. and that was that the strange beast in the pool was a parasite-like existence. This parasite parasitized the host, and relied on the host's flesh and blood to grow. It also controlled the host's behavior. Back then, Zhanbai had been parasitized by such a parasite. Perhaps that was why Zhanbai had chosen to self-destruct. After all, it wasn't easy to become a demigod. It wasn't worth it to sacrifice himself like that. However, if Zhanbai had known about the existence of a parasite in his body, and that the parasite was likely to eat away at his flesh and blood step by step and control his body, then it was understandable that he had chosen to self-destruct. Rather than being controlled like a puppet, it would be better to die a worthy death. However, unexpectedly, Zhanbai's head luckily survived, and for some unknown reason, it fell into the depths of the small pool. The exotic beast hid in Zhanbai's head, avoiding the calamity. Previously, Kongwen had only released the shadow of a strange beast from his body. There was no actual body of the strange beast. The reason was probably because the parasite in Kongwen's body wasn't very strong. Or rather, it wasn't complete. Hence, it could only fight as a shadow. It seems like there are more of these parasites deep underground. It seems like I'll have to be extra careful when I go deeper underground. Zhuowen squinted his eyes. He was even more alert. He knew very well that if he were to be parasitized by such a parasite, he would most likely become a puppet. Thinking of that possibility, Zhuowen couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. Zhuowen shook his head. He then looked at the 100 weapons in his hand. His eyes suddenly became extremely hot. The 100 weapons were ascended holy weapons. To him, it was extremely precious. What was more precious was that the 100 weapons had the King Blade Saint Talisman attached to it. The King Blade Saint Talisman was extremely compatible with the 100 weapons. It could increase the power of the 100 weapons by several times, or even dozens of times. Zhuowen thought for a moment. He didn't plan to combine the King Blade Saint Talisman with the 100 weapons. Instead, he planned to combine the King Blade Saint Talisman with the Primitive Talisman. He knew that the more powerful the Primitive Talisman was, the more beneficial it would be to his comprehension ability and the growth of his cultivation. In particular, the combination of the 9 Saint Talismans could form a divine talisman that could help warriors comprehend the mysteries of the divine realm. Of course, the god realm in the legends of the Heavenly Armor continent should be the demigod realm. After all, there had never been a real divine transformation realm elite in the Heavenly Armor continent. However, even if it was the demigod realm, it was still very terrifying. After all, it was extremely difficult to become a demigod by oneself. It was almost unimaginable. Thinking of this, Zhuowen put the 100 weapons into the Azure Dragon Palace. At the same time, he let his mind energy doppelganger refine the 100 weapons silently. He sat cross-legged and released his perfect saint body and blood immortal to protect him. If I combine the complete King Blade Saint Talisman with the Primitive Talisman, I wonder what will happen to the Primitive Talisman. Zhuowen's eyes were burning. Then, he pointed his right hand between his eyebrows and took out the Primitive Talisman. The surface of the Primitive Talisman emitted a faint light. It was emitting a rich origin energy. Then Zhuowen slowly put the King Blade Saint Talisman close to the Primitive Talisman. Hiss! The moment the King Blade Saint Talisman completely merged with the Primitive Talisman, it emitted a blazing light. Then, Zhuowen felt an extremely rich origin energy escaping from the Primitive Talisman. It drilled into Zhuowen's forehead. As the origin energy drilled into Zhuowen's forehead, Zhuowen's eyes saw a further path. He saw the true immortal realm. Then, following the true immortal realm, he began to touch the demigod realm. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of understanding. Then he slowly closed his eyes and began to silently feel the mysterious feeling brought by the origin energy. The blood immortal looked at the Primitive Talisman floating in front of Zhuowen. Her eyes flashed. She slowly approached Zhuowen's body. Then, she sat on the ground and silently felt the origin energy's aura. Then, she simply closed her eyes and began to cultivate. The origin energy could peek into the origin. It had unimaginable benefits for cultivation. During the process of merging the Primitive Talisman and the King Blade Saint Talisman, the origin energy that escaped was extremely rich. This was an extremely rare opportunity. How could the blood immortal let it go? Chapter 1846. Extortion. A few days later, the blood immortal opened his eyes. His eyes were full of joy. With the help of the origin energy, he could see further into the path of cultivation. Originally, the blood immortal's cultivation was at the peak of the earth immortal realm. Now that he felt the origin energy, although he couldn't directly become a sky immortal, he could see the path to becoming a sky immortal. He knew what to do. Next, when the time was right, the blood immortal would have no problem becoming a sky immortal. Boom! Just as the blood immortal was immersed in joy, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly burst out from around her. The blood immortal's body trembled as she was suddenly hit by this aura. Then she fell to the ground in a sorry state. She was in an extremely sorry state. Then the blood immortal looked at where the aura came from. He saw that Zhuowen had opened his eyes. His eyes were shining like stars, and his aura was surging to the extreme. He was many times stronger than before. The blood immortal stared at Zhuowen and trembled. He couldn't help but whisper, "Mid-stage sky immortal?" At this moment, the blood immortal was secretly complaining in her heart. Zhuowen's cultivation had increased too quickly. Originally, she had planned to wait until her cultivation had far surpassed Zhuowen's. Then she would leave Zhuowen in a carefree manner. But now not only was Zhuowen's cultivation higher than his strength was also stronger than his. Moreover, Zhuowen's body also contained the origin energy from the origin talisman. He realized that he was really reluctant to leave Zhuowen. After all, the reason why the blood immortal was able to cultivate so quickly was largely due to Zhuowen. If it wasn't for Zhuowen's great fortune and continuous fortuitous encounters, the blood immortal wouldn't have been able to reach this level. Although Zhuowen had removed the slave seal on the blood immortal, if the blood immortal just left Zhuowen like this, he would still feel uncomfortable. Zhuowen's face was radiant. The origin energy provided by the complete King Blade Saint Talisman was too rich. After absorbing most of the origin energy, Zhuowen's cultivation base naturally advanced to the middle stage of Heaven Immortal. Although it was extremely difficult to reach the Sky Immortal realm, Zhuowen was different. With the origin energy, he had peeked into all realms below the demigod realm. In other words, the Sky Immortal realm and True Immortal realm were no bottlenecks for Zhuowen. The only obstacle was the accumulation of immortal essence. As long as Zhuowen could accumulate enough immortal essence, he could break through the immortal realm. Zhuowen's origin energy from the King Blade Saint Talisman, and turned it into immortal essence. Immortal essence, immortal realm. However, the origin energy was really limited. After pushing Zhuowen's cultivation base to the intermediate Heaven Immortal stage, it was completely consumed. In order to advance to the later stage of the Heaven Immortal realm, the amount of celestial core power or origin energy needed would increase exponentially. Currently, Zhuowen was unable to collect such a huge amount of celestial core power for his breakthrough. Even the immortal crystals in his spiritual ring were not enough. It seems like I'll need at least 1,000,000 immortal crystals, or a complete Saint Talisman origin energy to advance to the late-stage Heaven Immortal realm. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and thought of Wei Wuyin of the Beast Envoy clan. This old guy had colluded with He Wuxiang in the beginning and wanted to kill Zhuowen. Moreover, Zhuowen had also killed Wei Rui and had a deep grudge with Wei Wuyin. Even if Zhuowen did not look for Wei Wuyin would probably look for Zhuowen. Before Zhuowen got most of the topographic maps from Songjia, Zhuowen didn't have such an idea. But now, with the topographic maps and a general understanding of the topography of the underground, he dared not only to think about it, but also to do it. With that, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and left the exit of the passage. Zhuowen put away the blood immortal and the perfect saint being. The underground maze was very large. Zhuowen knew the approximate range of the underground maze and some dangerous places. Zhuowen also knew the exit of the underground maze. However, Zhuowen did not plan to go out now. Instead, he deliberately went to some dangerous places in the underground maze. Maybe he could meet Shiji, or the master of the tomb god in the underground maze. Of course, if he met Wei Wuyin or He Wuxiang, Zhuowen would be more than happy. The underground labyrinth was surrounded by thick rock ramparts. These rock ramparts were scattered all over the place and rotated clockwise. If one were to casually walk in the direction of these rock ramparts, it would be easy to walk into a dead end, or even fall into an extremely dangerous trap. Zhuowen flashed through the underground labyrinth again and again. Unfortunately, there were no cultivators in the dangerous places he went. At the corner of a rock wall, there was a large area of quicksand. The quicksand inside was constantly flowing, forming a whirlpool in the center. The whirlpool contained a terrifying suction force. If one accidentally entered the range of the whirlpool, one would definitely be sucked into the whirlpool. At this moment, a huge black coffin was deeply embedded in the quicksand. Due to the huge suction force in the center of the quicksand, the black coffin was constantly floating toward the center of the whirlpool. It would not be long before it was completely sucked into the center of the whirlpool. Not far behind the black coffin, another figure had also sunk into the quicksand. This person's situation was much better than the black coffin's. He was quite far away from the whirlpool, and his celestial origin energy was exceptionally powerful, so his floating speed was quite slow. Zhuowen stopped 500 feet away from the quicksand, and silently looked at the black coffin and the figure in the quicksand. According to the information given by Cungjie, this quicksand was called the soul-devouring quicksand. Its suction force was so strong that it could suck in any warrior below the genuine immortal realm. Once someone was sucked into the whirlpool in the center of the soul-devouring quicksand, his soul would be swallowed and his body would be buried under the quicksand, becoming nutrients for the quicksand. Zhuowen was no stranger to the black coffin and the figure. They were the first corpse king of the Serene Corpse Extremity and Kong Lianshuan, the ancestor of the Blood Sacrifice clan. The first corpse king and Kong Lianshuan also noticed Zhuowen, who was 150 feet away. The two of them both revealed astonished expressions. They didn't think that the place Zhuowen stood just happened to be outside the range of the soul-devouring quicksand's terrifying suction force. Was it a fluke? Kong Lianshuan took a deep look at Zhuowen and murmured in a low voice. The lid of the black coffin opened slightly, and a pair of dark eyes came out. They looked at Zhuowen, who was 500 feet away, with a bewildered expression. "Do the two of you need help?" Zhuowen said with a smile. The first corpse king said gloomily, "With just you? How can you help us? If you have the guts, take another step forward, and let me see if you have the ability to help us." Kong Lianshuan was silent and looked at Zhuowen quietly. He was very clear that if Zhuowen listened to the first corpse king and took a step forward, then this child would enter the range of the soul-devouring quicksand's suction force. At that time, he would be sucked in by the soul-devouring quicksand, and everything would be hopeless. "Sure." Zhuowen smiled faintly and took a step forward. His eyes coldly stared at Kong Lianshuan and the first corpse king, unmoving like a mountain. The first corpse king and Kong Lianshuan's pupils shrunk as they stared at Zhuowen, who was unmoving like a mountain, revealing an expression of disbelief. Zhuowen was clearly in the range of the soul-devouring quicksand's suction force. How could this child not be affected at all? "Take another 30 feet forward," the first corpse king said in a low voice. Zhuowen still had a smile on his face. He took a step forward and walked forward 30 feet in an extremely steady manner. He also clearly felt that powerful suction force, but Zhuowen was still unmoving like a mountain. The first corpse king and Kong Lianshuan both gasped, finally believing that Zhuowen was actually unaffected by the soul-devouring quicksand suction force. "How did you do it?" Kong Lianshuan finally spoke. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "If the two of you feel that you don't need help, then I'll take my leave." As he spoke, Zhuowen turned around and left this place step by step. However, when Zhuowen was about to leave, the first corpse king said in a low voice, "Wait, we need your help. Can you tell us how to break free from the suction force here?" Zhuowen stopped his footsteps and said with a smile, "Sure, but do the two of you want me to tell you the method like this?" "What do you want?" Kong Lianshuan said in a low voice. "I want all the immortal crystals on you," Zhuowen said indifferently. The first corpse king's gaze was cold as he said coldly, "What a big tone, actually wanting all the immortal crystals on us. Are you worthy?" Zhuowen smiled and looked at the first corpse king with ridicule, and said, "This place is called the soul-devouring quicksand. Once someone is swallowed by that whirlpool, their soul won't enter the cycle of reincarnation and will be devoured into nothingness. Your bodies will also be buried at the bottom of the quicksand and become nutrients for the quicksand, never to see the light of day again. If the two of you want to be swallowed by this quicksand and become a lonely ghost, then I have nothing to say. Especially you, first corpse king. In less than an hour, you'll be swallowed by that whirlpool. Is immortal crystals more important than your life? I think the two of you should know better than me, right? The first corpse king furrowed his brows, then pondered for a moment and said, "Sure, these are all the immortal crystals on me. Can you help me break free from this quicksand now?" As he spoke, the first corpse king waved his sleeve and directly threw out a storage pouch. Zhuowen caught the storage pouch and found that there were only 300,000 immortal crystals in this storage pouch. The corner of his mouth was full of a sneer as he said, "The first corpse king's reputation is illustrious. It shouldn't be this shabby, right? You think it's too little?" The first corpse king said coldly, "I want all the immortal crystals on you. You only have this one chance. Or else don't blame me for not keeping my promise," Zhuowen said coldly. The first corpse king's expression froze. After a moment of silence, he threw out the storage pouch again. Zhuowen checked it and found that there were 600,000 immortal crystals in this storage pouch. Adding the 300,000 from before as well as the 100,000 on Zhuowen, he had around 1 million immortal crystals on him. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.